All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the State of DEIB. What's new and what's next? I'm here in person with my good friend and co-host, George Rogers.
Glad to be here. It's great to be here live in this awesome, such a holy ground of space here. So I'm excited to be here, join with you, Ben, as always. Even better in person.
Even better in person, as always. So we're looking forward to an amazing event with all of you today. We're going to share some good stuff. We're going to have some fun conversations, and we've got our prize stack back here, and some more behind the desk back there. We've got a lot of books to give away, so stay engaged, share your ideas. Let us know what you think is most interesting or most helpful for you in the conversations you hear today. We want all of you to be part of this bigger conversation because that's why we do these events, right? It's not just for our benefit.
Yes, it's connecting with other people, like-minded, that's going through some of the same things, that's learning, that's inspired to grow and really connect with others as well. And so I always have a good time, especially in the chat, listening to everybody's story, especially once we get our speakers going and just the connection there and really gaining wisdom and insight from each other.
Yes, for sure. There's so many good ideas, so many good insights. And I'll tell you that some of the speakers we have, some of the content we're covering are directly pulled from some of the conversations we had at some of our events this year and in years past. And so 2 years ago now, you and I had an opportunity to work together on another event similar to this one in scope, where we worked through the course of a week. We interviewed a ton of speakers, had a lot of people sharing their insights, and really just came together again as a community to cover some of what was new. And I thought it was time for us to do that again.
Yeah, so it's great.
Here we are. All right. So really quickly, I'm going to run through a couple of quick announcements just to kick us off for the day, let you know what to expect, let you know what's ahead. For those of you who have been at one of the events that George and I have hosted in the past, welcome back. If you're new, it's a little different. It's a little more engaging, a little more interactive probably, and maybe some more energy as well. Who knows? So we're glad to have you here. Let's jump into a couple of quick things. So the session today is scheduled to run for about 2.5 hours approximately. It is a live stream. So sometimes some of my friends over here, I won't name any names, make it a little long-winded, so I'll have to trim it up and make sure we hit that time target. I'm kidding. I'm the one who always has to get edited because I'm too long-winded. So it's going to be a great conversation today. We have a couple of supporters we want to thank really quickly, and you're going to hear from some of their teams, their people today during the conversations. But the team at Bright Hire supporting us for the event, thank you so much to them for the work they're doing and help creating more equitable interview and hiring experiences. The team at Brick as well, they're doing a lot on the hiring front. We'll hear from a company that's using some of their tools to create science-based decisions instead of just, it feels okay, but science-based decisions when it comes to hiring people and growing them inside the business, which is a lot of fun. And then last but not least, the team over at Bob is doing some good work with DEI analytics and dashboards and helping us communicate with our leadership teams to really understand what the priorities are when it comes to that. So we're going to hear from all of them today in the conversation about what they're doing to help support this, covering different angles. Right? I didn't want to have 5 sessions on hiring or 5 sessions just on performance reviews or whatever else, because there's so much that touches this topic that I want to try to give all of you a set of insights across the board, and hopefully not just give you ideas, but also give you some encouragement like, hey, I want to go explore that further. I want to go dig a little deeper as well. And not only these incredible speakers, but we're also going to be hearing from some people that you all know and love. George has got a session later in the day that I'm so excited to share with you. And so there's some really good stuff. As I mentioned, we have copies of the book Belonging to share with you in honor of, this is not George's book, but in honor of some of the data you're sharing today. Yeah. Some of our new research on belonging. George will be unveiling that, talk about what belonging means, how we can measure some of those things, and how that impacts other things we care about, like retention and well-being. And I don't want to give away too much of that, but I'm so excited to share some of that for our events. Again, if you have not been with us before, if you're commenting, you're sharing, we're going to grab some names halfway through and probably at the end as well to make sure we give away all these books, because we want all of you to get some further encouragement and a good takeaway as a thank you for your time spent with us today. All right. Speaking of time spent, let's jump into the agenda really quickly. So this is what you can expect. Oops. This is what you can expect.
It's live.
There we go. It's live. There we go. We're going to have a keynote panel first where I talk with Funda and Dominique about some of the things they're doing. So these two are DEI executives. This is what they're doing day to day. They're responsible for these things. They're reporting on these things. They're accountable for the kind of things we're talking about in the conversation. And so we'll dive into some of those kinds of conversations, what they're doing. We'll talk to Adi from Hi Bob about connections and the importance of leadership and culture. And you're going to love this. I know, I'm speaking George's language here now. We're going to pause for some giveaways and things. We're going to go into equitable hiring with Allison Perprasado. We're going to talk to her about what she and her team are doing there. We're going to go over to structured interviewing and give you some ideas on how to create more unbiased interviews. I can't wait to get your thoughts on some of these things, because some of them they're so practical. And why don't we all do that? And I'm hoping after this conversation, you all will. And last but not least, we have George wrapping up the event. It's an interview, but it's a closing keynote almost. Why not? And he's going to share some things with us around belonging, why that matters, the importance of leadership in that bigger equation. So it's going to be a tremendous, tremendous day. Anything else that I didn't mention before we kind of get the ball rolling on things that we need to be thinking about?
No, you know me, Ben. I'm excited. I'm always ready to just dive in and go live and connect with our people that's already in the stream. So hello to everybody who's already in the stream. I would also say, hey, if you are watching this and you're on LinkedIn, please do us a favor and share it.
Oh, yes.
Share it with your network. Let other people, don't be selfish. This information, share it, invite somebody. I know it is maybe a little bit too late to register, but go ahead and share this and connect them on the stream so they can get some insight as well. I think this is going to be a lot of good stuff.
It is not too late to register, George.
Ooh, it's never
too late to register.
Never.
Everybody's going to want to know about HR, CI, and SHRM credits and things like that at the end. And so you have to be registered to get those. So if you just caught the stream and you're on here, make sure you do register so we can get those things out to you after the event is over. All right. And with that said, I think we're ready to get started with our very first session. We're going to hear from not Adi. She's the second session. We're going to hear from Dominique Brewer and Funda Klimsky. These are two leaders that are practicing DEI principles day to day, leading those functions in their business. We're going to hear from them some of the key things they're doing, the things they're proud of, the things they're accomplishing, but also some of the new ground they're trying to break as well to really help us hit at the part of this event that's looking at what's next and what's coming down the line. So here we go. Hey, everyone. Welcome to the first session of the day. And I am so excited to be here with you for this incredible keynote. So we have a panel here, a great set of experts and practitioners who are going to talk to us about what's happening in the space, how they are addressing some of the challenges in their own companies, things like that. I'm so excited to have Funda and Dominique here with me. It's going to be an incredible conversation. Both of these are wonderful people, and they're going to have some good stuff to share with us. So I'm excited to have both of you here. Dominique, I'm going to let you do a quick intro for yourself first. Would you start us off by telling us who you are and what you do, please?
Thank you so much, Ben and Funda, for having me. My name is Dominique Brewer. I am the interim head of U.S. Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at Takeda, transitioning into the head of culture and engagement for our U.S. commercial business unit, and very excited to be a part of the conversation today.
Wonderful. Glad to have you. Funda, how about you?
Thanks for having me, Ben. Hi, everyone, and glad to be here with you, Dominique. My name is Funda Klimsky, and I am based in Istanbul, Turkey, and I lead diversity, equity, inclusion, and corporate citizenship globally for Nielsen IQ.
Wonderful. I'm glad to have you here, both of you as well. And I'm looking forward to a fun conversation, diving in some good stuff here, and hopefully giving the audience out there some encouragement, some ideas, some inspiration that they can also make some strides in the right direction, that they can continue down the path as both of you have helped your companies to do. And so I'm looking forward to drawing some of those things out in the conversation. So both of you hold these incredible roles as leaders when it comes to DEI and in that discipline specifically. And Funda, if you would start us off, I'd love to hear from you. What is a trend or a change, something that you are focusing on or prioritizing right now?
That is a great question. So first of all, I think the biggest trend right now is having a good focus on diversity, equity, inclusion across all corporations, which is a great thing, of course. But within that, I think for the past couple of years, what we have been focusing on and what we're seeing outside of our company as well is intersectionality and intersectional identities. It is super important because, when you are focusing on, especially if you have like employee resource groups within any company, they do focus on a singular affinity, which makes perfect sense. But at the same time, you might end up becoming an exclusive mindset, exclusive club-like setting within that employee resource group or business resource group, however you call them in your company. So you run the risk of marginalizing some people within an already marginalized group, right? So intersectional identities is super critical, and I think that's one of the trends, and that's something we're definitely focusing on.
Would
Go
you
ahead, Ben.
pause for 1 second and just define that for everybody out there, because they may not know what intersectionality actually is?
I was absolutely. So that's where I was getting. So
Okay.
We all come with different identities, right? Like I'm a woman, that's one of my identities, but I'm a white woman. That is my intersecting two identities. I'm white and I'm woman. I have a disability, so that makes me a woman with a white woman with a disability. So all of those are my intersecting identities. Add to that, the quote unquote smaller identities like being a mother, being a daughter, being a sister, being this and that in life as well. So all of those come together and make up who we are. And every single person is a unique individual. So yes, absolutely, we have to put a very important light and focus on broad affinities, broad identities like women, like LGBTQ plus, like Black, right? But when you do that, again, like you run the risk of undermining the differences within each affinity. So that's what intersectionality is, and that's where we see this focus on intersectional identities are coming from. Out of that, obviously comes allyship, and that's another trend, and that's another big topic that we are focusing on. So allyship is being there for each other. It's being there for everyone, right? So and in the words of a great author, you can never be an ally. You can always be an aspiring ally. Like you cannot identify yourself as an ally. It's always a work in progress because you can never walk in someone else's shoes. You can never do that. Like it's lived experiences, right? Allyship is trying to understand and being there to support. So those are the two big trends in my opinion, in the diversity, equity, inclusion space today.
Tremendous. Wonderful. Dominique, how about you and your team? What are you thinking about? What are you focusing on these days?
We're also focused on intersectionality and allyship and bringing everyone into the conversation. So what we've recognized is that this is hard for some people to see themselves as having a role to play in the discussion. And so really expanding to look at the breadth of diversity. If we think about like the social identity wheel that was built back in the 90s, that's hard for people unless you've trained to be a clinical psychologist. Like, what does that even mean? What does that look like? And what do you mean primary and secondary identities? And also the feelings that you have when you're starting to have discussions around things that might be foreign to you, to Funda's point, right? If you're talking about race and you're like, hey, I'm a cisgender white woman, what does that even mean? What type of role do I play here? Hey, I'm an individual that identifies as having a disability. What does that mean? How do I get comfort for myself to have the conversation, let alone supporting others? And is a disability the same level of consideration required as someone who's talking about being a member of a minority group or an underrepresented group? Helping people to understand that diversity, equity, and inclusion go together. So those three things have intersectionality, right? Diversity is a fact. And what do we mean when we talk about diversity? So outside of that one physical category, you have relationships, values that include, our belief system, cognitive, that include the neurodiverse spectrum, and et cetera. Societal, relational includes birth order. We went through an activity, and afterward, one of my team members said, "Are you the oldest?" And I said, "Yeah, why do you ask?" And they're just like, "It makes so much sense now," right? But bringing everyone into the conversation to say, hey, at any one point in time, just to communicate, you have to label. So I'm looking at you and I'm like, Ben, you're a man, right? Or I identify you as being a man. I don't technically know how you might identify yourself, but I'm making a series of assumptions based on my experiences just to communicate. And I need to create awareness of what are all of those things outside of the one limited category that we leverage to communicate that might inform or influence someone else's identity and how they see the world and operate. And if we can have that conversation, then we bring everyone into the discussion. So now everyone has a place in that, conversation, and diversity does become more of a fact. And people start seeing the opportunity to identify what are those intersections, because we're not one dimensional, right? We are multidimensional. Our identities are multidimensional. And through that approach, we have a collective awareness and sense of duty, and even belonging, right? And that's at the end of the day, what everyone wants is a sense of belonging. So that way we can advance the conversation forward. And that's been a part of the journey that we've been on at Takeda.
That's so wonderful. Brenda, when she was saying some of those things, you were like nodding vigorously over here. I could see you about to come out of your chair, I think. Yes, absolutely. Anything you want to add or comment on, or anything that Dominique shared that you want to double down on, possibly?
No, I absolutely agree with everything she said. But what I was, I think, vigorously nodding at was the piece when she was talking about being multidimensional, right? Every individual is multidimensional, and no affinity is a monolith. Like, you cannot identify women as just women, because there's so many other, dimensions to being a person. So I think that's where I was like, yes, absolutely that.
Okay, wonderful.
I love that, Funda.
Yeah. I was going to say, one of the things that I do when I'm looking at the research that we gather is I'm always trying to find what are the differences, what are some unique things that I can call out for employers as action items to go and support their people. Because when you say, like, as an example, in the last year when people said, oh, half your employees are going to quit because of this resignation thing, the first question from employers was, okay, what half, right? And if you said, hey, the women in your workforce, they need this support, like, yeah, but maybe not all women, which ones, right? And so that's the thing that we try to get at with the data is you got to start peeling back those layers and looking deeper, because right, the second you say, okay, they're a part of this group, as both of you have said, you lose all the other things about that person that makes them who they are. And so we've got to be careful about some of those broad generalizations of, oh, well, every woman in the workforce has got to have this resource, this support.
Exactly.
Some of them may put no value in that at all, and others would embrace that heartily the second it's offered. And so that's one of the things I picked up from some of the things y'all are sharing there. So Dominique, I don't know if this is a softball, if this is a hard one or not. I want to throw this question to you just to start us off. I'd love to hear from you. Is DEI as a practice, as a discipline, is that a talent initiative? Is it a business initiative? Is it both? I'd love to hear from you what your thoughts are on that.
That is a loaded question, but thank you very much for it. I greatly appreciate it. And I think it's both, right? You need people to run your business, and it's not something that's separate. If you think about your customer population, whichever industry or segment you might be in, there's a mission and there's a goal that you have to achieve, which normally involves your customers. For us at Takeda, we know that the experiences of our people and patients, including our customers, the stakeholders, everyone that makes up that collective group, play a critical role in making us able, or allowing us to be able to achieve our shared mission. It's better health for people and brighter future for the world. So if we think about being diversity as a fact and being equitable and inclusive, it's threading the needle through everything that we do, right? So at our organization, we start everything with considering the patient. So we have a very clear way of looking at issues, and it's patient, trust, reputation, business in that order. I think, Ben, you've heard me say that before in the conversation with Lauren. And if our long-term success depends on fostering an inclusive environment where everyone feels welcome, empowered, and inspired to contribute their unique perspectives and talents, that means that's in every single part of that equation, right? It doesn't just stop. It's not only external. We need to have the same approach internally as it relates to the teams that we're working with, being part of a group cross-functionally. And people need to feel like they're able to bring their whole selves to work and their perspectives, and be curious and connected to ask questions. Are we considering what the impact will be of things that we're doing? And so by talking about being inclusive and equitable and really helping people understand the difference between being equitable and equality and what that means and how you operationalize that. It doesn't mean that something's being taken away from one person and given to another. It's that everyone needs support and access, and that's varied, right? The best of talent is going to need different types of support at different points in their career. So if we can look at it from that vantage point and understand that every single person adds value and makes a contribution towards achieving our shared mission, vision, purpose, then it's part of your ways of working, right? It's embedded into your business. And that helps to remove it as just being an activity, right? Or a check the box thing that people are like, so when are you going to talk to me about diversity, equity, and inclusion? Well, it's a part of our DNA. It's a part of everything that we do. And we can't achieve that without the combined talents of our entire organization.
Like that. I wrote down operationalize equity right in there, because it's about weaving it into everything. It can't be just like, okay, we've done everything else. Now let's think about how to add that in at the end, because sometimes it doesn't fit at the end, right? We should have thought about this in the very beginning and how we weave this in. So
that's right. And I think when we first talked, we had talked about like our changes to the talent process, right? Like making sure everyone has equitable chance to be considered, whether they're an internal candidate or an external candidate. And so, in chaos, modifying processes to be equitable helps us to achieve the other layers of the strategy that we look to execute on.
Tremendous.
I absolutely agree. And I love the fact that you are mentioning, how you embed everything into embed all the DEI aspects of it to broader HR processes, right? When people ask like, so how many people do you have in your DEI team? And I'm like, I have the entire HR organization. That's how it should be, right? I have to have, a good visibility into the talent practices from hire to retire, by the way, not just, what we do. Anyway, I'm deviating, my apologies. So back to your question, Ben, which I totally agree with Dominique that it is loaded. The question being, is it a business initiative or a talent initiative? I would agree again, it is both. And I will say this too, and I totally agree with everything Dominique said, and this is just an add-on. It is both, and it lives through both our talent practices and through our businesses, regardless of what your business is, right? Like for us, for instance, we're a research company. So having a diverse sample in any project that we do, that is the heart of our job. There is no research without that diverse sample. So for us, it is at the heart of our business. The same thing applies to Takeda, because, healthcare, hey, we're talking about people here. It does apply to, what I mean? Like, it is the demographic that we're talking about. So that is the business aspect. And, like the business case for diversity makes itself, right? Like we don't necessarily have to work really hard to explain why it's needed, because it is the outcome of our products. Be it, you are a business to business company or a business to, customer company, doesn't matter. The business piece is always there because, we deal with human beings at the end of the day. So from a talent perspective, obviously, like the talent focus is a little different than the business focus when it comes to having a diverse workforce and having an inclusive culture, making sure that you have equitable processes and not just equal, as Dominique mentioned as well. So that, I think what I'm trying to get at is it is both, and they go hand in hand, but they're not the same thing, right? Like they don't have the same focus. One of them is a business focus, the other one is a, talent process focus, but it always is there together.
It sounds like they, especially in the cases for both of you, right? Dominique, we talked about this with like thinking about this when it comes to drug trials and like all these other kinds of things, right? From the business perspective for you, I didn't think about that prior to our conversation here, but you had that focus, Dominique and Takeda. And then with the research and everything else that Nielsen does, and like those two things are great examples of how, guess what? Companies don't serve people, people serve people, right? We don't understand who those customers are. We can't serve them well. And so while it's sometimes we're it's like maybe pushing the boulder uphill when you're having a conversation internally about DEI initiatives, when it comes to, hey, guess what? This makes good business sense. Some of those conversations may be doors to open up the conversation and say, hey, well, if it's good then, why not now? Right? If it's serving a need there, why not serve a need here? That's really, I hadn't stopped to think about that until I heard both of you sharing some of those thoughts on that.
That's so insightful. And if I can just add, the only thing is when we talk about talent initiatives, it's normally on the front end during the interview. But once they're hired, there is an entire employee life cycle experience. So we still need to look at development and providing opportunity, and that sense of belonging doesn't stop at the interview phase, right? It continues onward. And so when we say talent, looking at the holistic life cycle of that candidate and employee experience, and what does that look like? And how does that help you, that sense of being inclusive, creating the environment, allow you to achieve for whatever your company's focus is?
Exactly. That's why I love the phrase hire to retire, right? It covers the entire life cycle.
Right.
You think about taking a road trip as a family. I don't know if they do that in Istanbul, but here in the States, right, that's a common like tradition for the summertime.
Oh, I've done it several times in the US with my family.
I'm thinking when we take a road trip, you don't drive to the end of your driveway and say, okay, we're done. No, there's a lot left to go. There's a lot of other road to cover. There's a lot of things to do. There's a lot more, are we there yet? Kind of conversations. And having those, when we could probably have some fun conversations about the DEI version of, are we there yet as well? Okay. So we've covered some really interesting ground so far. Funda, I want to come back to you and ask, again, you talked at the beginning about some of the things that you and the team are doing, some of the ways that you're trying to bring this together. And I'd love to ask you if there's anything that you and your team have accomplished, whether it's your team with a DEI title or that entire team of HR leaders you've deputized, as you mentioned a minute ago, to bring into this community, anything that you've accomplished that you're really proud of or anything that you're excited about?
Oh goodness, how much time do we have, Ben? So that is a huge question. And in a nutshell, what I would say, what I'm most proud of with the DEI work that we do at Nielsen IQ is that, as you put it, I love that, I'll steal that, deputizing the entire organization to do the DEI work. That's the most I'm proud of. Okay. But I will give you another example of what me and my team are working on, which we call a 3E framework. It is educate, empower, engage. And that is a framework we use for our line of initiatives. So for educate, what we focus on is we want to make sure that we create safe spaces for people to be able to talk about quote unquote anything. And what we want to make sure is there are so many topics that we should be talking about, we should be bringing to the table in the workplace at all times, with no hesitation, with no reservation, with no fear, but we never do. Either the situation is not, like whatever the reason, right? But we have to bring those topics to the table. It's called a lot of things. Courageous conversations is one of those, but we call them diversity dialogues. So what we do is, this is under educate, and it is totally internal resources, meaning we bring our own associates together around the table, virtual, because it is a global initiative, and we do this from across the globe. And we talk about things. So far, what we have covered mental well-being, we have covered LGBT identities, we've talked about, you know, being a woman in the workplace, and we had like 5 different women from all over the world with totally different identities to focus on that intersectional identities, to show people that like being a woman is not a monolith. We're all totally different, you know, backgrounds, so on and so forth. The second piece of the 3E framework is empower, and that is something I love, because it is we bring in an external support to help our associates develop their storytelling skills, and then they do a 10-minute or 5 to 10 minute TED Talk style speech, and that is the empower piece. We empower them to share their stories, right? And out of that experience came the third piece, which is the engage. And we found out there are so many amazing stories of our associates out there, well, in here. So we came up with a new idea, a very new idea, something called podcast. So we are doing a diversity and inclusion podcast that's called My Blank Story. So for each episode, we fill in the blank with an emotion. So it's my joy story, my resilience story, my love story, and we share our associates' inclusive journey within the company. So that is the initiative, let me put it that way, the initiative that I'm most proud of, that I'm working with my team.
That's really neat. And you and I were actually chatting before we started recording about you personally are a big fan of podcasts. That probably gives you some extra joy to be part of that, to help use that medium to share.
Absolutely.
Podcasting overall is a very personal sort of thing, because if it's just audio or even it's video, right? When you're piping yourself right into someone's ear, it feels very personal, right? And that's why I was so excited to finally have a chance to meet Dominique here, because she and I had a podcast together 2 years ago now, and I got to hear her, and I got to know her, and I got to love her, and I never even got to have a chance to meet her. And so I was looking forward to this connection for this event. So Dominique, what about you? What are you and the team up to? Things you're excited about, things that you're proud of, anything that you'd like to share there?
Yeah, and thank you for that question. There is too much to cover,
yes.
As Funda mentioned. There's so much happening, and it's really wonderful, because the major thing is that at Takeda, every single person is focused on creating the environment and looking at not whose role is it, but how can we partner to make sure that we're considering the up and downstream impact of the activities that are going on. And again, thread that needle, because people are overwhelmed, right? Like, life has been overwhelming for the last 2 years. I mean, we are in unprecedented times with the pandemic that we've been dealing with all of the social unrest and just the challenges that we face every single day. And we still have to deliver for our patients, our customers. And so really looking at, in the last 2 years, we've done a lot. We've created a Center for Health Equity. We also have a group that looks at the clinical trials. We call it Health Equity and Patient Access, in our R&D group, to make sure that there is pull through across the board. How are we looking at the communities that we serve and ensuring that there is access from a trial basis, the health equity on the back end, right? What are we doing within the communities that we're serving, and how are we evaluating and creating access points that we maybe previously didn't have line of sight to, the data that we're evaluating, and where are we getting and how are we looking at the data and the insights. My grandmother always says there's no new problem under the sun. It's just your first time running into it. And so lots of conversations sometimes around if we're surrounded by the same, even if it's the same school as an example, then we tend to look at things in a very similar fashion, which means that we're losing out on the opportunity to innovate. And so if we can create an environment where everyone is part of that conversation, and we've done through our learning and development program that does expand the breadth of diversity to go outside of just that physical category, looking at equity, identifying those hidden barriers, being inclusive, how we respond to difference, and looking at structural and behavioral components of that, then we give people the opportunity to participate fully. And so also leveraging those venues that we have from a resource perspective. Like we have a new global head of well-being that's brought several programs to Takeda, Thrive, which has been phenomenal for our colleagues. We've leveraged the Calm app. We've looked at well-being days and modifying our benefit structure to give people that ability to really disconnect from work. Looking at our ways of working, one of our global executive leaders in our employee experience survey said, hey, this is a huge pain point, not just for one group, for everyone. So how are we defining agility, and what can we do to really partner and modify some of those processes so we've removed a hidden barrier that causes a lot of other feelings and emotions around those processes not working within the organization. Our talent group has made tremendous processes, and I'm going to use the term customized for their business needs, because it's not a one size fits all. Just like people aren't monolithic, all processes and ways of working are not monolithic. So really empowering our leadership team to evaluate, what does making modifications to our talent processes look like for R&D versus oncology versus commercial versus global manufacturing? How are we going to show up as one organization and really help people understand the values of fairness, integrity, honesty, and perseverance that Takeda has, and apply those internally for our existing employee population so that they're also feeling that we're considering them and helping provide those resources to be innovative and do their job and love coming to work. So it's not just an employer of choice and talk, not just a company of choice and talk speak, but actually how we are embedding that across our entire organization in an operationalized way. I know that was a lot of information, but hopefully that answered the question. So I'm proud of all of it.
Okay. I took some good notes in that for both of you, by the way. I took some really good notes on this. I need to figure out how to capture these together, bring them out together and share with everybody, because hopefully everybody out there is taking their own notes on this, because I know I'm getting some incredible ideas and some great encouragement and some inspiration as well, like I was hoping for. But I've written down some really, really interesting things from really being customized to the business needs, because, oh, well, this solution worked for them, so it'll work perfectly for you. Don't even change anything. We know that's not likely to happen. And then some of the things, Funda, I love the 3E framework you're talking about there, and really bringing those pieces of it together, because just educating isn't enough. If you're not engaging them and bringing them along for the journey, right, then it's easy to say, well, we've trained everybody, so we're good, right? And we know that's not even halfway down the path in order to meet some of these needs. Okay, so we've got just a few minutes left, and I want to ask I know I'm like boxing you both in, but if it's possible, like 60 seconds or less, what advice, what recommendation would you give to people listening in right now? Because they're here because they want to get better. They want to improve. They want to learn from your journey, just like you're continuing to learn, as you mentioned earlier. Like, this is a continuous process. So Dominique, if you would like to go first, any advice, recommendations? It doesn't matter if it's something you've already shared that you want to reiterate, or if there's something new that you haven't shared yet, but I'd love for you to give them some encouragement, some advice that can help them as they're trying to make strides like you have within their own company.
Thank you for that. And I didn't highlight all of the resources. I talked about the programs, but I did have a chance to do a Ben Eubanks impersonation through our podcast. So I got to do the intro, and I was like, what would Ben do? Recognizing that this journey is a continuous one, like with learning, right? We're never going to be done, because genetic cloning is impossible. So we all have, well, not impossible, it's illegal. So we all have different perspectives, different ways of looking at things, and everyone's going to be in a different place, and that will change over time. And life is situational. And so, you know, it's more of a journey instead of an arrival point or destination, and meeting your people where they are on that journey by expanding the discussion and highlighting those intersections helps to make it less overwhelming. If we stop looking at it in a silo and evaluate the areas of opportunity for collaboration and support, like within well-being, like in learning and development, and in talent, and with our business imperatives, at the end of the day, every single thing that we do touches each one of us in each of our roles and the intended outcomes, KPIs. And so if we think of it that way and help bring others along, they feel more connected to it, and it helps us to create a tie-in in the form of some type of strategy, because we're looking at it holistically instead of like a separate check the box activity. And so I would just think of it as a holistic experience, and recognizing that this is a journey, not a destination, and it's okay to meet people where they are. Just come along with us. Let's lock arms and work toward a better organization. So a better Takeda, right? I think that's been the most helpful way of reframing the discussion.
Tremendous. Wonderful. Linda, how about you? What advice, recommendations, encouragement would you give the audience?
So, gosh, in 60 seconds, I think I would start with just highlighting what Dominique said. This is a learning experience and it's never ending. Let's start from there and end there too, right? Like, and fill in between. And that in between is, you know, you can make sure so many things are happening within your organization. One, you know, diversity versus inclusion, not diversity and inclusion, right? Like diversity versus inclusion. Do you understand the difference? When you give a seat at the table, are you ensuring that seat also has a voice at the table? So that is super critical. Dominique, you know, mentioned this a little bit earlier, like equality versus equity. Are you making sure that, number one, you understand the difference, but number two, that it is operationalized in an impactful manner? And when you think of it from that perspective also, DEI is not one person's or one team's job. Anything we do under diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, engagement, all of those are every single associate's, you know, quote unquote job in the company, right? Like, you need to give people the voice to speak up about it, from you know, bottom up, but also from top down. You need to make sure that your senior leadership is also you know, owning this and supporting it, and making sure that it's visible to all stakeholders. And in order to do that, you have to embed everything that is about diversity, creating a diverse workforce, creating an inclusive culture, making sure that you have equitable processes. These should be embedded into everything you're doing from an HR perspective. And I cannot re-emphasize it enough. Like, hire to retire, that entire process. When a job post goes out to your employee being, you know, exited the company, that should cover all of it. So it is a learning experience. You will make mistakes. We are human beings. We all make mistakes. The thing is, own your mistakes, learn from your mistakes, and move on. We're going to be better off with those.
It takes all of us, right?
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
All of us are smarter and stronger and better than any one of us, right? So let's get together on that. Tremendous. Okay. this has been so wonderful. Again, I've gotten a tremendous number of notes and ideas and suggestions out of this, and I know the audience has as well. For all of you out there, please make sure you let Funda and Dominic know in the comments how much you appreciate them. I want to ask both of you, if it's okay with you, I'd like to put your LinkedIn handle in the comments here so people can reach out and connect with you, let you know that they appreciate and support the work that you're doing, and they're inspired by you as well. Is that okay with you?
Absolutely. I'm always here to support another individual and organization. We have to support each other as well, right?
Okay, perfect. I wanted to make sure that was good with you. So wonderful. I'll make sure and do that right now. So I'll pop that in the comments so y'all can reach out, connect directly with Funda and Dominique, let them know how much you appreciate them for sharing their wisdom, sharing their time and their passion with us today. To both of you, thank you so much again for taking the time out of your busy schedule, solving all these big problems to help everybody else in the community here to be a little better, to level up some. So thank you again for joining us.
Thanks for the conversation, man.
Sure. To everybody else out there, hang tight for more State of DEIB coming up shortly.
Every time you say hang tight, I'm holding on, Ben. I'm holding on for greatness.
George is hanging tight over here.
Hanging by the moment.
So for all of you out there, one of the fun things for me is George and I do a lot of events apart. And so we don't get a chance to have the chatter between. And so it's fun for me because I get to see which things over here kind of light his fire a little bit. He gets a little excited about it, or I can see him sit up straighter when someone says something during the session. And so I'd love for you to take a second and share some of those things that you heard. So it was the first time for you to actually hear from Funda and Dominique what things they're working on, what's important to them. And so
yeah, I think obviously a lot of things that stand out for me, and it's just a constant reminder for all of us when we talk about the DE&I space and the allyship that goes with it, Ben, it's really connecting with all of us. This is, a lot of things that can become programs, but to me, it's really a lifestyle. It's what we should be and who we should strive to be. And it all connects together. The diversity connects with equity and inclusion, and someone can't have one without the other, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you're really trying to strive to grow and really connect everybody, it takes everybody. It takes all stakeholders in the workplace to really buy into these things. And there was a few things that really stood out, some comments that really stood out to me as well. Been around you a lot. Data is like it bright. Anytime I see data, I don't see data. I see Ben, and so those are one of the things. That was a huge comment. How does this data really take place and change it? And for me, I think from a business mindset, not just data in this market, but just data in general. Data tells you where you are, and the outcome of that is really where you want to be, right? Or you're just committed to where you are and you don't want to change.
Yes.
And in this space, I would say,
missed opportunity. Missed opportunity. We'll just say that.
Opportunity.
Yeah.
Exactly. I think change has to happen. If we want to continue to grow, I always say without change, there can be no growth, because I believe growth equals change. Whenever you're growing, something is changing. It may not be external, but sometimes it's internal. And really in this space, before you can really create these strategies is what I like to use, not just business strategy, marketing strategy. We need to have a culture and DE&I strategy within the workplace that ties it together. Before you can have these external, it really, for all stakeholders belong to, it has to be internal as well.
That was one of the things that really stood out to me, is both Funda and Dominique clearly said, this can't be just us, right? You can't push a rope. I always heard, right? You can't make something happen that's not supposed to happen if no one else is willing to be committed alongside you. And so they talk about the importance of bringing people along with you. This isn't something I'm going to beat you over the head with. It's something you're a part of this too. Guess what? I have to respect who you are, what you're about, things, your emotions, what you care about, all those kinds of things. And you've been talking more about mental health lately, right?
Right.
I got to respect those things about you if I want to get the best out of you when it comes to work.
I think that's the connection, right? That's the leadership connection. That's really, understanding who I am as a person and where I am, and then also where I want to be, right? And that leadership connection, we as leaders in the space, that's just natural. Sherry V, I want to share this statement that she made. Sherry V, I appreciate this comment. You stated, we have to remember as human beings, we have to maintain human focus. And I'll add to this, not only human focus, we got to maintain human feelings, right? How people are, that connection, as again, we talk about the root of all this thing is really connecting and then understanding who you are and how you're feeling from a well-being place, mental, place, where you are. Do you understand this space? And let me help you understand it, right?
Yes.
And that's friendship. That's saying, hey, I'm ignorant to this situation. And I'm dumbfounded by everything maybe around me. And there's still some people that have not been exposed to this. A lot of businesses are just now tapping into it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's because they've been caught up in other things. But when you expose yourself to this realm, the best way to really learn is really to understand and connect. Let me connect with Ben and just shut up. Show me data. Show me the data. It's kind of like show me the money, Jerry Maguire. Show me the money. No, show me the data, and then I'll know where to go from there.
Yeah, excellent. I really like that. I'm going to give a couple of quick shout outs too. There were so many good comments during that session. I can't wait to see all of you continuing to chime in as we go through the day. Alicia Davis, you had a great comment in there about one of the things that y'all been doing internally is having some of these kind of small roundtables. As George was saying, like this is informal. This is not scripted, and we're not holding you to anything. It's a safe space. You can ask a question and no one's going to shout you down or beat you up because you just don't know the answer yet. I think it's a great recommendation, Alicia. I'm going to make sure your name's on the list for a book later on. Don't you worry. There were a couple other really good comments in there as we were going through there. I know the Sherry, we're going to make sure your name's on the list as well for a book because George was all a flutter from the comment about treating people like human beings because that's a key part of your message is as leaders, right? The culture we build, the focus we put on equity and inclusion in the workplace, all those things come down to that common denominator of we're all people and we've got to understand people if we're going to do it well.
Exactly.
And then one last thing, Shelly, Laura, you had a good comment in there about probably pulling from the speakers, but it doesn't matter because it was a good one to reiterate. Like just educating. Today, you're all getting some education, but the important thing is to take this back and then engage with your people. Just trying to tell is never going to lead to a real relationship. Right? If I just talk at George all the time and never actually stop and listen, that's not engagement, right? That's a lecture. Yeah. And it's a very different sort of sentiment there. So I was glad you called out as well.
I think it's don't just speak it, live it, right? Don't speak it, just live it. I do know that there was a key word in my love language. Somebody mentioned shoes. Because can't walk in each other's shoes, but we can walk with each other. There's a journey there. And so that really stood out to me. I appreciate the shoe comment.
Oh, goodness. If he'll just keep his shoes on, we'll all be good. Or at least I'll be good. All right, everybody. So we're going to dive into our second talk here today. We have Adi here from Hi Bob, and I've actually seen her in the chat already, so I know that she's hanging around with us. She's already ready to engage and has been answering some questions already as we go. She's going to talk to us about some of these things we talked about actually leading into this around using data, using a dashboard, sharing some of your DEI information in a way that's transparent because what gets measured gets done, right? If we're measuring it, we can see where we are, see where we're going, as you mentioned a minute ago, and hopefully know how we can make some improvement there. So we're going to dive into this conversation with Adi. Here we go. Okay, everybody. Hey there. So glad you're here with us. And I know you've been hearing some great conversations already today. And I'm here to bring you yet another one. I'm so excited to be here with Adi Janowitz. She's the Chief Customer Officer for Hi Bob. Where we talk about some of the ways that they support and serve their customers on a global scale, how they enable them to do some of the things we're talking about today around creating more inclusive cultures, how to make sure people feel like they're connected and they belong. It's going to be a great conversation. Adi, welcome. Glad to have you.
Hi, Ben. Great to be here today.
Absolutely.
How are you doing?
Hey, I'm having a great day. I'm so excited. I actually got up this morning at like 4:45 and started writing. And my best time to write is early in the morning. So I was just fired up. I don't know why, but there we go. I'll take it.
Amazing. Okay, go ahead.
Well, before we get into some of the stuff I want to talk about with you today and understanding how you're serving customers and how you're enabling them to do some of these things we're going to be discussing, I'd love to get a little more about who you are and what you do, please.
Sure, gladly. So my name is Adi, as you've mentioned, and I'm a proud mother of 3. Live in Herzliya, which is just north of Tel Aviv. And I actually started my career as a programmer and gradually fell in love with the client interaction. And thankfully, around 15, 20 years ago, I met the arena of customer success, which was pretty new at the time. And I said, wow, that's exactly the spot I love, just in between technology and value to our clients. And ever since I've been in that arena, for the past 3 years, I've been at HiBob, which is basically a modern HRIS platform for multinational, modern, mid-sized to sub-enterprise companies. And I'm happy and excited and feel like the luckiest person on earth to be in a company that puts people first, as well as help clients put their people first.
I want to ask you a quick follow-up on that, if you don't mind, because I don't meet that many people who start out in software and programming are like, you know what I really want to do? Deal with a lot of people. And so what drew you to that? Was it using the technology to help solve their problems, or was it something else there? I'm just kind of curious.
It's funny how it started, right? I had this spark in my eyes. I'm super excited and passionate about what I do. And one of the managers caught that and said, come to an exhibition with us, just to have one of the programmers with us and kind of be able to tell later on how it went. And that was the first time that the interaction with the client hit me, how we're describing what we're developing to create value. And for a young developer, that's a big breakthrough, understanding there's another angle to look at software. And gradually, more and more interaction with our clients led me to understand that the code I'm building is meaningless unless it's providing a solution to a specific problem. And that's what drew me to be there, to really be able to make software count for people. And the rest is history.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thanks for letting me take a little side detour there, because I was curious about that piece of it. Like I said, that's not a common story you hear, but I completely understand that once you see that connection, right, you see the purpose, the impact, the work you're doing. That's really powerful. That's a connection, like you said, that's invaluable if you can get that early in your career. Very neat.
Spot on.
Very neat. Okay. So one of the things I want to ask you about is when it comes to this conversation that we're focusing on today with this event around diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, those kind of things, many of those things either work or don't work based on leadership support. Our leaders have to fully believe in this. They've got to bring their attention and effort and investment in some cases to make that happen. And I wanted to ask you what you see. You have this perspective, this unique perspective across a variety of customers. How can we use data, use information when it comes to those leaders to make our DEI goals more tangible? Any suggestions on that?
Yeah, sure. I'll start by saying that D&I is not just about hiring for diversity, but mainly, if you ask me, about inclusion and what it means to us to be inclusive within our culture and within our team. And a lot of that relies on creating a safe environment, an environment in which each individual feels okay to voice their opinion, feels okay to voice their concerns or challenges, or even to say we're having a bad day or what have you. So creating that safe environment is becoming key to be able to create that sense of inclusion. We call it at HiBob, bring me, win as we. And it's all about bringing your authentic self so that we get the multiplier of multiple opinions, multiple thoughts, and so on to create the best results out there. And it's all about winning together, which means sometimes, making sure somebody else is in the spotlight, but as long as we can support them and make something a success, then we're all for it. And how do we measure it, or how do we make sure our company embraces that? You're right to say it comes with leadership. So at the end of the day, the focus on the numbers would be coming from the leaders and so on, but having tools that allow us to see our salary split to different genders or ethnic groups, having performance reviews assessed by also which gender performed the review to which other gender, and seeing if there's a specific bias, can definitely make an impact just by putting a spotlight over it. It's not about finding something specific that someone specific has done wrong, but about looking at another angle of the data so that together we increase the awareness. And just by knowing we're able to measure that and looking at that and talking about the high level numbers, you see a great improvement in the focus. KPIs are all about focus. When you have KPIs, people talk about the numbers and understand there's an idea of what good looks like, and helps us all work towards it.
So make sure I have this right. You say bring me, but win as we. Is that how you said that earlier?
Yes.
Okay. I want to make sure everybody heard that one, because I think that's a great reminder for all of us about the importance of having your true self there, but also we are either going to make this work, or we are going to not be able to do that. So I like that piece of it. One of the things you were sharing there around, this isn't about pointing out someone who's done something wrong, or trying to catch someone messing up necessarily, but it's about awareness. And one of the ways I look at that, you probably can appreciate this with your software background, is when I'm coaching employers and working through those kind of things, I say, this is not about, pointing a finger at you or saying you did this wrong. It's about a process improvement exercise, right? We're trying to get better at this overall. And just like writing software, peer reviews, things like that, it's not about saying, hey, Adi, you messed this thing up, but it's like, hey, we're together. We're going to band together. We're going to create the best thing we can. And so that's the first thing I thought of there, is this can't be just a, hey, it happens over there. It's all whatever else, but this is the thing we're all in the middle of. We're all participating in, and we win as we, as you said, we're going to have to be together if we're going to make this successful overall.
Exactly, Ben. And that's the kind of culture we want to promote. It's all about us looking at KPIs so that we can become better and make sure we're embracing everybody within the team to be able to take part of this success.
Excellent. Okay, so I'd love to hear from you, because I have met some of your clients over the years, and they are incredible, incredible companies. I'd love to know if you have any examples of companies that are doing a great job when it comes to this DEI conversation. Anything that they may be doing differently or uniquely, some kind of differentiator that might be a lesson learned for the audience out here that's listening in?
Yes, I think one specifically comes into mind, and that's VaynerMedia, which is a great client of ours and a design partner as well, that not only have diversity and inclusion chief officer within the company, which on its own talk about, the space or the focus that the company puts on this. And we see this role more and more often. And a lot of our companies we're here are looking to create a clear understanding or clear ownership within the organization for those KPIs and so on. But within VaynerMedia, it's even more of a ingrained culture of how we make sure that our team, again, are felt heard. A lot of the conversation that I had with Claude Silver, who's the Chief Heart Officer at VaynerMedia, is exactly that, about how we create a safe environment on the other hand, but do not compromise on radical candor, if you will. We have to make sure that the feedback we're giving to people is such that can help them grow, right? And sometimes those are not easy conversations. It's about being brave and being able to articulate what it is that makes people, what feedback we can give people to help them grow within the company. So that combination is key. And you raised a brow when I said the Chief Heart Officer. Yeah, that's the title that Claude Silver has within the company. And it's all about making sure the employees are being heard and get a space within management's agenda, if you will, or within how we run a company or how we run a business. So to me, this is such an inspiration.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. To think about, if we asked anyone out there right now, like, hey, what does it look like if a company is not doing this well? Right. That's one of the things they would say is everybody doesn't have a voice. Everyone doesn't matter. Only a few people matter. And they're the ones who are at the top of the food chain, essentially. Right. Everyone else might as well not be there. Their voice isn't heard. And so I think that's so critical to say, this is not just a thing we're saying as a leadership team, but a thing that we're enabling through the tools we're offering to make sure every person, if they've got an idea or suggestion, they've got a request, they have a need, they can make that heard, and their voice actually counts for something. That's that's an incredible thing to strive for any of those out there listening in right now. I would agree.
100%. And I think one great example of that we just had internally in HiBob was for one of my managers to be able to find a job for another individual contributor that we could not find a place for while they were moving to another country within a different company. So this is how it is important to us, or how much the individuals are important to us and how much we care for them. And I think that not only made that person specifically feel really great about them and about the experience with HiBob and everything, but actually those people that are staying and understanding that we have their back. We want them to succeed. We want them to have a place within the company. But even when they don't, we care.
Yeah, we care in good times and bad times all the time, right? That's paramount, that we show that we actually care about what happens to someone else, and not just things happen, whatever else. That there's all kinds of ways you can excuse something or explain it away, but people remember how you treated them especially when things were tough. They always remember that.
Mm-hmm. Ben, I want to, add another angle to that, because it's not, being a caring manager is a great opportunity for me to be at my best at work, I would say, or to be the person that I want to be at work. But it's more than that. I believe that by doing so, plus having clear KPIs, having clear goals for the team, the combination of the two, plus radical candor, if you will, helps us get to where we need to and excel in it and build the exceptional, as we'd like to say at HiBob. We're really passionate about building something unique and special for our company, but also for other companies. And we do that by making sure we have KPIs and we measure them and we look at the results, and we talk about with radical candor, we talk about what went wrong and what is going great, to make sure that we continue to excel in what we do. But we do it all with extra care and making sure that while we do that, there's room for everyone to grow where they're strong and where they can contribute.
Well, that kind of leads me to the next question I wanted to ask you. Is we finished a study recently, and one of our team members is actually sharing some of the data here at the event today about belonging and what that means for the employees. But one of the key things we found in there is that connection between their manager. It matters so much whether they feel like they belong, they're connected, they're respected, or they feel like they're completely disconnected from the company. Right? This whole belonging conversation is like the latest iteration or evolution of this DEI discussion. And how do we make people feel like they really belong? And we're seeing the role of that manager play a critical part. I know one of the things you mentioned earlier is, right, let's look at performance reviews. Let's look at these interactions that are already happening in the business through the platform. And it can give you insights into that. I'd love to hear from you, like this manager, this employee connection piece. Why do you think that's so important? And what sort of lens or perspective do you have on that overall through the experiences that are happening in the platform?
Amazing. So at the end of the day, I think we're all, human, and we strive for interaction, and we rely on that. It's often said that people leave a workplace because of their manager. Like, this would be the number one relationship that counts, because that's the person that would lead them. That's the person that cares for them and make sure their voice is heard, as well as coach them to succeeding in what they do. We actually even have a one-on module within Bob that allows you to manage those conversations and kind of in a recurring way. And that's key for a lot of dimensions when it comes to one-to-one relationship. That continuity and even rhythm, if you will, knowing what the conversation would cover. There's a certain structure that we'll go through. We'll talk about your KPIs. We'll talk about this and that. I'll connect that to the business goal that we have in front of us. And I'd love to also talk about how you are doing, Ben, on a personal level, right? Like, being able to wrap that conversation in a structure that is known and familiar goes back to creating that space, that safe space, while at the same time, we're not neglecting talking about what we are here to achieve together from results perspective, and what do you need from me in order to succeed. So for me, that's the way I would frame a one-on-one. It's really about a manager supporting their individual contributors into succeeding through giving them tools and looking together at what has been done so far. And to some extent, now that we're kind of in this hybrid way of working, a lot of time we neglect the small talks, because every conversation is kind of structured, or we have time on the calendar for specific agendas, if you will. Making sure part of this agenda is to talk for a few minutes about what's going on in your personal life. What's the one thing that gives you the power to start your day, and what's the one that is taking you down or making you slower today. And I think being able to talk about that and reflect that goes back to, at the end of the day, allowing you to perform at your best.
I'm so glad that this conversation turned to the manager piece, because for those listening in right now, you're hearing all these strategy and the bigger ideas and things like that. We started off around, being open with metrics and being clear about what's happening. But this manager piece right here is where the DEI conversation often falls apart, because we can agree to anything as a leadership team, but when it gets to that manager who's going to make a decision, who's going to lead their team well, as you're talking about, all those kind of things, the manager can make or break any of that kind of stuff. And so I love that you're giving everybody here some practical ideas on, hey, guess what? Make sure your manager's having their one-on-ones, number one, because they often skip them or they're just focused on the tasks, like you said. And when they're having those, we've got to incorporate the other things, as you're saying, like this. Our research shows that a manager who doesn't understand their people has virtually no chance of actually supporting them. That's data from the workforce saying, my manager doesn't understand me, they can't support me. And you're putting it out here plain for everybody to see. This is how you understand someone. You find out what they're about. You find out what makes a D tick, what makes her excited, what keeps her going on the weekends, what she's so excited about, the project she's working on, she can't wait to tell everyone about. Whatever those things are, that manager has to know those things. And sometimes it's as simple as asking a question, zipping your lips and just waiting for a minute to hear what they have to say, right? So I'm glad you brought that out.
I want to highlight that it doesn't come natural to every manager. And that goes back to hiring and how I choose managers to be on my team. We call them culture builders. So a lot of times we are talking about hiring culture fit, right? Like looking for people that have the same culture or share the same values. For me, when I choose a manager, culture fit is nice, but not enough. We need people that are culture builders. Those are the kind of managers that are passionate about building culture, building a community, and community can be a team, can be a group, can be the entire client base that we are working with. But being passionate about this and not seeing it as an additional chore while you're getting promoted is key to being a successful manager. Oftentimes in the world of technology, and especially when you look at groups of programming and so on, it's very easy to promote people based on their performance. But if we don't look enough to make sure that the people we promote are passionate about coaching, are passionate about building that safe space for each one of their people and allowing them to succeed, then we're not setting ourselves to success in terms of building that culture and embracing it and creating that safe space.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to make sure I give you a chance to tell everybody how they can connect with the team at HiBob, hear more about the work that you and the team are doing, maybe see some of these stories of some of these customers that you've talked about here. What's the best way for them to connect or learn more?
So first and foremost, of course, we have our website, which is hibob.com, that you can go in and look at our blog that has amazing content related to what we've been talking about, but on other areas that are like more operational, around people operation and so on. Everything you can find there is amazing. Our clients also have the benefit of an internal community, customer community, that I always enjoy looking at and kind of seeing the amazing conversations that are going there.
Okay. Wonderful. I'll make sure, if it's okay with you, I'm going to put your LinkedIn profile probably in there as well, so they can reach out and connect with you. Is that okay?
That would be brilliant. Thank you.
Perfect. Because I know that the audience here loves reaching out to the guests and the speakers and the people who are participating in this, because they don't just get to know some of the things that you're doing and things you're talking about. They get to know a little bit more about you and who you are. So I know they appreciate that personal connection as well. Thank you so much for joining me, for sharing some ideas here, some good practical takeaways for the audience. I know they appreciate it, and I do too.
Thank you, Ben. It was a pleasure.
Absolutely. To everybody else out there, hang tight for more State of DEI and B coming shortly. All right. Welcome back, everybody. And I hope you enjoyed that conversation. I know there were some good call outs there. And one of the things that I think you might have appreciated was not about culture fit, because when she said culture fit, you started like hyperventilating a little bit. And then she said, no, it's about being a culture builder. And I'd love to hear from you what that means to you, what you think about that.
Yeah. So I believe, and this is personal, George Biblical in the book of Euliah, but I when I hear culture fit, and I tense up, right? I tense up because if the pandemic has taught us anything, if the distress and tension that we've faced over the last 2.5 years, and some of that stuff has always been there. Let's just be honest, right? Yes. But sometimes things magnitude make it a huge issue, right? It's under magnifying glass. George Floyd,
Yes.
Breonna Taylor, all these things happen, and it really exposes what we have been sweeping under the rug, so to speak. And throughout these last 2 years, I've found it hard to fit in. Right. I've always, struggled fitting in, but I wanted to be a part of things. And so sometimes we try to fit in with the group, or we try to fit in with the crowd because we want to be connected. We want to be liked. And when I hear culture fit, the light switch turns off and I leave the room because nobody wants to fit in anymore. If anything, during this pandemic, a lot of people have found their identity, and they found themselves. They've been alone for so long that it's like, I don't want to fit. I want to be who I am. And I believe the culture builders, I love that term. When I heard her say culture builders, I'm like, yes, because to me, that means culture add, right? When we bring in a new person, we're not trying to have them fit in. We're trying to add to what we already have and help them be who they are, and really allow them to bring their souls to work so they can then build our culture together. Because what does it look like to have an all Black business and some of our clients are white, right? What does it look like to have a Black and white business and we're trying to reach multi-generations and multi-races? It's important to have that culture add so that we can build not internally, but also externally to our community, to our clients. I love culture builders.
Awesome. I would say something about a mic drop, but this is my mic and he can't break it. So I'll need it for another live stream at some point.
Culture builders is his equivalent. Look at his face, everybody. Just look at the camera, man. Culture builders, when you mention culture to me, it's equivalent as data.
Hey, I get pumped about the numbers, right? The evidence of things, because even in the people business, if we can use the data to help us understand the people better,
yes,
right? Understand what they need
100%.
from us, to understand what their desires are, to help us find the thing that makes George tick, so that we can make you feel connected, make you feel like you belong, not make you fit in.
Yeah.
Right.
You build it. You build it. The data helps us as humans connect even more.
Oh, goodness. Excellent. All right. So we're going to transition to our next, next session. I'm getting all choked up already. For our next session, we're going to hear from Allison Lee at Persado. She's a chief people officer. So she's going to share some insights on how they're using science. They're using a tool called Brick. They're using that to help them with their hiring, with their internal ability practices. They're using this to help them get away from that. I like George. He's nice. I'll just hire him. Whether that's a good choice or not, I won't comment on that one for the rest of the other. Now, we're going to get into how they use science to help figure out what things matter in a job and then hire people to fit those things, right? Not because they make us feel comfortable, not because they're like me, not because we went to the same school, right? Or whatever else. Those things are all irrelevant. We're looking for what really matters in a job and to make more equitable and bias-free selection processes as part of that. So let's dive into this conversation, hear from Allison, some of the things that they're doing in and around this. Take some notes, some good takeaways, because you'll get some ideas on what you can be thinking about when it comes to your own organization as well. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another session here at the event. I hope you're having a great time so far, getting a lot of good notes, good takeaways, good ideas, inspiration as well. I know I am, and I've been looking forward to this next session so much. So I have here with me Allison Lee. She is a chief people officer, and she and I were kind of kicking around some ideas before we started here. One of the things is, like many of you probably, she fell into this space kind of unintentionally, was drawn into this. And so, Allison, I'm so glad to have you here, and I'm looking forward to this conversation. Before we dive into some good stuff about what you and the team are doing, would you give the audience a little more about who you are, what you do, please?
Absolutely. So I work for Persado, and we are all about putting language to work for our customers. Our platform creates content that's going to resonate and drive more action for our customers. So that's the tech side. But even equally important is our people, and caring for our people and putting the programs in place that are going to support them. And so I'm the chief people officer. I have an amazing team, and we're really just focused on, our employees and their satisfaction and growth, and, keeping them with us.
So I don't want to delve too far into your background because we have other things to talk about. But one of the things you told me is you come from the business side of things. I'd love to hear from you, your perspective on why that matters so much in someone who does the kind of work that you do.
Right. Yeah. I fell into it a few years ago. I had worked on a product team. I'd worked in enablement. I'd worked in customer experience, just all different roles. And it helps me so much when I have to help solve for business issues, people issues, leadership issues and challenges, to really understand where they're coming from and maybe have to explain to the head of engineering, why the head of product management may, feel a certain way, or why things may be being held up. And so it's really, really lent to this role in people, lent really well to that.
I'd imagine it gives you a lot of credibility with those leaders when you can say, oh, I've been there, right? Or I understand those metrics you're held accountable for, or things like that. When you're outside that HR bubble that many of us kind of find ourselves trapped in. And because you're outside of it, you can have a different perspective. You can speak into things where you might otherwise be shut out of the room potentially. So.
Absolutely. I used to, run commercialization. And so we need commercialization, we need enablement, we need this, and, to help drive things forward. So it really helps a lot.
So you said you're working on making sure you kind of, I can't remember the word you used, like basically empowering your teams right now, empowering your people, helping to connect with them. What are some of the things you and your team are focusing on, your big priorities right now?
Our main priorities right now, I think, are not unlike all people leaders. We're focused on hiring and we're focused on retention. On the hiring front, it's less about volume hiring. I think that everyone's slowing down just a little bit with this economy. We're focused on smart hiring and, making sure that we're bringing in the right people for the right roles, making sure they're mapped, not just to check a box or to make sure we're getting people in, but we want them to be happy in that role. We want them to come in and feel happy and satisfied and feel like they've got a new home. So we're really focused on, that smarter mapping to those roles, and then retention, of course. We all know what's going on with, people having lots more opportunities and just deciding they want to go parasail rather than work. And so, we're focused a lot on just making sure that we can keep our employees happy through programs, whether it's career development, with strong performance management, employee education, things like this, but just making sure we can keep them happy and keep them with us.
I wasn't interested in parasailing until you said it.
Right?
Suddenly, now I'm like, wait a minute, that would be a lot more fun than what we're. No, maybe not. We don't want to in this conversation with you, Allison, but more fun than the other parts on Workday, I will say for sure.
Absolutely.
We talked about mapping here, and so the team at Brick actually connected us because I'd asked them, "Hey, I'm looking for someone that can talk about some of these things." So this is actually a perfect segue into that conversation. For the leaders out there listening into this bigger event today is around how we can be more inclusive in hiring, right? How can we create more equitable workplaces? And so a big part of that journey starts at the hire, obviously, but then there are other things like you talked about development and equitable opportunities inside the business too. So if you want to start on the hiring side, I'd love to hear from you. What do you mean when you say mapping people to the right positions and looking for that fit, not just fit, but where they're actually be happy and they're going to be excited to come into work every day?
Right. I think that often recruiting teams, they're given numbers, right? There's like, hire this person and you want to have your quick time to hire and just check these boxes off. But we are trying to approach it more where you're looking at the resume for competencies. So all of our roles, we have certain competencies that we've identified or laid out. And then we want to look at the resumes for those competencies. And then of course use Brick because we do the assessment based on, competencies as well as, fit for our company. And so we can use that data to ensure that we're looking at that resume, making sure it's the most qualified person. Of course, interviews, you have to interview and you've got to, check that they can actually do the job, that they're going to be happy here. But we're a very data-driven company. And so we absolutely use that data from Brick as well.
Okay. So talk about that just a bit, because obviously what makes someone a good developer is different than what makes someone great at customer success, right? Their skill sets are different, but also maybe in the behavioral traits, right? Or the competence behind that, what make them who they are, those are probably different as well. And so when it comes down to it, are you helping to, okay, we know what a good one looks like, so we're looking for more of those? Is it, hey, we want you to apply for this, but we also know that within this range, this is kind of what we're looking for? Help me understand a little more, because everybody's on a spectrum, right?
Right.
You could see my desk here. You would see that organized on that spectrum, like way on the disorganized side. That is me, okay? To the chagrin of my wonderful wife. That is something I don't have. But right, for these people, there's probably like an acceptable range of what they're looking for and things like that. I'm just kind of curious if you have an example or like something more specific in there that you're like, hey, we've got to have someone that hits these things. They're going to be a great developer. And then beyond that, sky's the limit. They can be, it doesn't really matter other than that.
Yeah, absolutely. All of our roles, every single one of our roles, we set there's different degrees of certain competencies or qualifications or characteristics that you can
Okay.
set for every single one of our roles. So whether it's a people person, I don't care if they know math. I don't care about certain things, whereas for a data scientist, we care more about that. So you can set the bar and to different degrees for every single role, but we also map to competencies. So all of our roles also have competencies set so that we can say that this is what's important for this role. This is what's important for this, specific hire. And then we can look at the data presented from the assessment to say, okay, on paper or via this assessment, it looks like they're going to be a great match for the role. Then we pick out the people who score the best for those roles, and that's who may get interviewed. So it's more bias free. It's not about, oh, Joe, you look great on LinkedIn, or Susie, look at the data. And we also encourage our recruiters to push our hiring managers a little bit more too, right? Because I think hiring managers, you're picking yourself. You're picking somebody who you think you're going to get along with, and it's almost an imitation of you. But we push them to say, okay, I'm glad you like Bill or Julie. However, the data shows that Susie may be a better match. So challenge them a little bit more to look at that data in making their hiring decisions.
So when it comes to that, one of the things that so I've done that myself in the past, where I've challenged hiring managers because they're picking something that's comfortable, that's familiar, and right. But at the same time, they're like, man, I wish we could solve this problem, or I want to find this person. I don't want. So I'll pick on you because you're here, right? I want to clone Allison. I want another Allison, but I don't want any of Allison's faults. Like,
right.
That sounds like the perfect candidate, and that perfect candidate doesn't exist, right? So we're going to make a decision based on the data we do have, not based on the data we don't have. And so what I love about that piece of it, really encouraging those recruiters to push back a little bit and say, yeah, I know you want those 17 required skills or whatever else, but we're going to have to narrow that down a little bit, or we'll never find anyone, number one, or afford them if we can't find them, or right, we're going to be selecting down so far, we're going to pick someone who looks just like you or everyone else who's already here.
Right.
And we're not going to be able to have that diverse perspective on the team because everyone's going to be the same.
Right. Well, and the data also allows you to dive in. So let's say one of your requirements is Q or problem solving, and they don't score as high as you'd like. You can always dive in then, right? It also provides this opportunity for you to say, ask better questions, or have somebody else interview on an area that may be of concern where they didn't get, a quote high enough score in that area. But you can dive in and ask better questions to find out, did they just not take a good test, or, or then I'm not a good test taker myself, but I can talk all day long about people's stuff.
I like that piece of it, because usually the interview is very scripted, right, and we have this set of questions. And right, one of my challenges with hiring managers in the past is some of them would be like merciless. Oh, you said this thing. Tell me about all the details of that thing. Like, let's unpack that for 20 minutes, and that's 10 minutes gone. And others, you would say something, and I'm like, hey, there's a thread there, pull that a little bit, and they would just skim right on by. And so I love that you're talking about here. You may see in the data, hey, by the way, this is an opportunity here for us to dive a little bit deeper for this candidate to understand, hey, tell me about a time you did have that project that was difficult. How did you work around the issues? Or right, if you had a conflict with someone, how did you work around that? You get to dive into some of those things without it having to be
a gut feeling.
Yeah, gut feeling, or just completely scripted or whatever else. You can be a little bit tailored depending on the candidate to make sure everyone gets a fair shake, and they're not getting shut out when they were borderline, or they missed one question or whatever else, when they really are capable of doing it if you give them the shot to prove that.
Absolutely. It's always a risk. We have to encourage hiring managers too. Nobody's going to be perfect. We can do as good a job as we can, trying to bring the best candidate in. But sometimes you just have to take a risk. A data-driven risk, perhaps, a data-supported risk, where BRIC helps us because we've got the data to support a hire. But sometimes it's a little bit of a risk that you've got to take.
So I want to make maybe a weird parallel connection here. So you talked about some of your experiences over on the business side, and it is my sense that sales, marketing, right, other areas of the business have a lot of data, a lot of rigor around how they evaluate that. They use that to make a lot of decisions. And then you have the benefit of stepping into HR and you're like, hey, where's the data? So it's like, I saw it over there on the table the other day, maybe, but no one's seen it since. Like, it's like kind of the Wild West almost, it feels like, in terms of this. Do you think your background in those other areas of the business makes you more capable of saying, hey, there's a gap here where we should be using data, we're not yet? I'm just kind of curious. That's a kind of open question, but I would think that perspective would make you a unique give you a neat perspective when you step into the people side of things.
Yeah, I mean, I think anybody who's in a people role is also a gut person. Do you know what I mean? You're just innately a people person. But I think the data I learned really quickly, especially at Persado, that I work with a lot of math data driven people. And at first I'd say, my gut tells me we should do this for DEI. My gut tells me we should do this for the people. And it was not met with really resistance, but why? And then I started using data. We had a people analytics person added to the team. And then I strictly use data to make proposals or to make decisions. So everything that we do, it's always a data-driven decision, especially if I need to persuade my boss or our CFO to invest. I always bring data forth because it's the only way you're going to win.
Yes, ultimately, right? They speak that language, and if you're not, you're the odd person out.
Absolutely. And I don't think I was in my first couple of years in a people role. It was more that gut. I think this is going to win. And luckily, many of the things did. But once I started learning to fight with data, I found it so much easier. There's no battle. It's just here are the facts.
I have good friends who have also held the same role that you hold at different companies. And that's one of the things they all swear by is you never show up to a meeting without having some numbers, some evidence, something like that, because everyone else is going to have it and you're going to look right, ill-equipped at best, foolish at worst when you're just going on these things. And so I love that you discovered that early on. And you had the benefit of coming outside into the HR space, but I would think that makes you more valuable now because you've got all these things at your disposal and you're like, oh yeah, let's crank it all the way up. What other data, what questions can we ask? What other data can we explore? What other ways can we look at this to make decisions and not just base it on, well, they're trying it, so let's try that too. Let's use the data.
Well, and in these roles, what's interesting about the chief people officer role is you can be in a team meeting or an executive team meeting or leadership. Everyone has an opinion on the right way to run a people team, but I'm not going to go to the data science person and go, you know what I think you ought to do, or here's how you code to our head of engineering. Everyone has an opinion on what we do on the people side. And what rating scale you should use for performance management and those sorts of things. So oftentimes I'll have to also, again, use data to fight their theory, how they think it should be run. And so it's just always very interesting.
If I can ask you to be open about that, is that tiring to be like that? Or do you feel like that makes you and the team sharper overall, or both?
It's great to be challenged. You're not going to grow. You're not going to learn unless you get challenged. So I would say it depends on the topic. It depends on the day. And it really depends, because I also challenge right back, right? That's my job too, is to make sure our leaders are showing up the best they can, to make sure that our processes are being implemented and executed upon, to make sure that all of the amazing programs that my team works so hard on are being supported and evangelized. So I don't necessarily mind it because it forces us to go, is this the best thing? We've been doing this for 2 years. Should we think about a change or a shift? I think that's something you have to accept, is that everything we do affects every single person, and the people are who really, really matter.
So we talked a lot about hiring. What about decisions about moving people inside the business? I know some companies are thinking about using that same kind of data. It seems like it has some of the same applications and benefits. What are your thoughts there?
Absolutely. I mean, the number one reason we see people leave our company is career mobility, career development. It's all people talk about is I wanted to grow in my career. So career mobility is a huge focus for us. And so we can use that data too. So if somebody isn't either doing well or they're no longer interested in being a solutions consultant, we can look at the data to see if they would be great in customer success. We can look to see if they'd be better account manager or a salesperson. Or we've had people go from accounting to content. We've had marketing come to the people team. We've had lots of shifts. We're super proud of our internal mobility, but we, again, can use that data to say, are they just bored with this job, and they just think it's fun to be in the people team because we just have, a great time and plan parties? Or, do they have the EQ we need? Do they have the skills? Because it is a strategic business role. And I don't think enough people understand all that's necessary in a people role.
How much of that is driven by the employee and how much of that is driven by the company, right? Or someone on a manager saying, hey, I need this person, and they start to actually look inside to see who's got the right capabilities to fit that? Or is it all, hey, this person, right, we're getting signals that maybe Jerry over here is not plugged in anymore we're going to start looking at other options. I'm just kind of curious, is that driven by the people? Is it driven by the company? Is it kind of a blend of both of those? Because the reason I ask is because I can imagine, right, there's a woman on a team full of men and she's like, I don't know if I want to be here or not. And right, she can start looking for other opportunities in the business to help keep her and help keep her connected.
Right.
Those kind of things. So I'm kind of curious.
I think it's situational. We've had so many different situations happen. It might be a team is downsizing and you're like, well, wait, that person is a culture carrier who's super smart. We do not want to lose them. Look around. Then it also could be somebody who's just bored, not liking their team or their role. So they are interested in other roles, just all sorts of situations. But we have a very clear mobility program and process that people can follow. Yeah, so that we can make sure that we keep them, because we want to retain the good employees. All of our employees are great, but people that are super strong, and we want to make sure they know there's a path. The only path is not leaving, and it can be, and that's fine, and we want them to be successful. But look inside and see what else could be available for you.
When I look at the research on sort of the highest quality sources for hires, one of the things that gets me is alumni, people who were here and left and now we're hiring them back. It's one of the highest qualities of hire. And I have to wonder how many of those people didn't have access to something like this.
Right.
They can say, hey, what's next for me? I want to look inside the business. They feel like there's no other choice. They leave and the company eventually says, hey, let's bring them back if they want to come back. But so many of them probably would have stuck around if they saw that opportunity in front of them. So I really love that approach, and that's so incredible to hear. So if you had to give a piece of advice or a recommendation to the rest of your peers out there listening in right now, other talent leaders, other HR leaders, other leaders who are trying to influence the people side of the business, any advice or recommendations you might give?
We're very focused on DEI, but one thing that I think I would say to everybody is, if you are going to have a focus on diversity, inclusion, belonging, just make sure it's sincere, it's transparent, it's achievable. And I would also say, don't set forth any, huge strategy unless there's a plan to support it. And if there is no plan, if you're just gonna, speak to your strategy or what you want, speak to your aspirations. Like, what do you want to do? So that's it's going to take time and patience, and we are not perfect by any means. We're certainly aspiring to be a more diverse company. We want to do better. We want to make sure everybody feels included and feels that they belong at Persado, but we are very transparent in that we've got work to do. Also on our, in our careers page, where we have our DEI section, we're speaking to aspirations and where we want to go. We've made great progress, but I think that when companies post these statements and these mission statements about their DEI, but the numbers aren't there and the proof isn't in the pudding, it's a little bit disheartening to employees who come in and then go, wait a second, this is not what the website said. So we really try to speak to aspirations and just be really transparent and honest with employees. We're not perfect, and we're doing everything we can to get there, but you're a part of the equation too. Help us. Be a part of this, be part of the solution.
Well, I'll tell you that it's so encouraging to hear that. We finished a big study up earlier this summer, and one of the findings that came out of there is that a person's sense of the employer's overall transparency and openness is very highly correlated with their sense of equitable treatment at work.
Right.
So to your point here, even if it's like we're not there, but we're trying to get there, people appreciate knowing that you are still aspiring to that and that you don't feel like you've arrived already. So the data back it up from what the workforce is telling us, that those two things, they see them as very tightly connected, and you're seeing that play out practically, it sounds like, day to day.
Absolutely. And then maybe we focus on inclusion, because we know we can have a say in that. Now we can work on making sure our employees feel that they belong, and that we have programs to make them feel a part of our our ethos. But the diversity hiring and that's a little bit more difficult. It's a little bit more challenging, and so we're working really hard on it.
Okay, excellent. All right, I was going to offer, if you're okay with it, I'll put your LinkedIn connection here in the chat so that the audience can reach out to you and connect with you after they heard you speak. I guess I've heard you just now share. So I know they'll all want to connect with you. I've got some good ideas and things. I love hearing your story, very open, very transparent, just saying, hey, here's what we're doing. We're not there. We're working on it. We're doing some good things already. And I loved hearing about some of the ways you're making sure that the opportunities both bring people in from outside as well as the opportunities inside the business are open for people. They're equitable for people. Everyone gets a chance at those as well. I love that you've approached that with such discipline, rigor, data, all the good stuff there. So thank you again, Allison, for spending some time with us, for sharing some encouragement with the community here. I know they appreciate it. All right, excellent. So thank you again, Allison, for sharing with us, for bringing some ideas, some encouragement there. Talk about the hiring side, and there was a little bit of a debate sort of in the chat. It looks like to me that it's not just about using data, but it's also using the people side of that. And I would agree with that. There's a couple different layers to it. Every time we bring a person into the mix, there's the opportunity for bias. And so that's the complicating factor. But at the same time, I don't want to get picked for a job by an algorithm, or I don't want, right? I don't want you to show up at a restaurant and like, we decided this is what you're going to eat because we just looked at all the people like you and we assume you're going to like the same thing. And right.
Yeah. I think, like you said, Ben, there's power in data, but there's also power in us as humans.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen a lot of people mention, and I remember during the process where we were hiring, at one point we had 18 locations, retail locations. And when we go through the hiring process, it was always about the heart feeling or the gut feeling. And sometimes your gut will lie to you, and sometimes your gut has a hitting portion called bias, right? And you hire because I can connect with this person, or I feel like they're like us in a sense of characteristics, maybe not just in color, but hey, I feel like they'll connect with us. And the reality is that maybe they can connect to you, but can they work with you and get the principles and the systems and processes that you have in your workplace? I think there has to be a balance there. I think the data does, as we said earlier, it really exposes the realities and those principles. Now, the question is, from a person standpoint, from a human standpoint, as we focus on that, does that really connect with where we are and what we need for the position? And as a business, does our systems and processes make it easy, right, for those things? So I think there's a lot of things that can tie into it. But as everything, if we're talking about diversity, we got to have diversity in all these. The data has to be diverse with the human, right? That's where we're going with it, yes. Right? It's all got to connect.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm with you on that. All right. So our next conversation is going to be with Haley Thornhill. She's over at BrightHire. We're going to talk some more about hiring. But we're going to get some really practical things from this one. So if you are thinking like, okay, I'm on board with these ideas, I think these are great, but I want to do some things, I want to make some changes in a positive sort of way, Haley's going to give you some little tweaks and changes you can make to things like how you review candidates after interviews, things like that, to get you thinking about this in a better way, to help to minimize some of the bias that exists there, and to create some more equitable hiring outcomes overall. And one quick shout out, actually, before we do this, I saw, Amy, you posted a really poignant comment a minute ago. For those of you that saw that, it's on LinkedIn. If you're following there, give her some advice, give her some encouragement. I know that many of us have been in a place where maybe our contributions were not valued. And so if you have any encouragement to give her hey, this worked for me, here's a strategy, here's a tip, here's a technique, or just even, hey, that stinks, commiseration, I've already seen that as well. Whatever you can share with her, I know she'd appreciate it, and I would too, on behalf of the community that we're working with here. All right, so let's get transitioned over. We're going to hear from Haley Thornhill at BrightHire about some of the work that you can do to help create more equitable hiring outcomes. Hey, everybody. I know today we've had some really great conversations already all around what's happening when it comes to diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging. How do we create more equitable experiences for our people, things like that. And one of the things that I intentionally tried to do is go through and pull in a different partner that touch different parts of the talent lifecycle. And so there's lots of pieces of that. And usually when we think about increasing diversity or inclusion, we think about, well, hiring, right? That's a place for us to do that. And so Haley Thornhill is here with me from BrightHire, and we're going to dive into some of the ways we can create more equitable hiring processes and create more inclusive hiring that make sure that every person that we talk to gets a fair shot at the position, at the opportunity that's available to them. And again, today we'll cover other areas of the talent process. But today, I want to really start off with this hiring piece of it because it's so important and it's what most of us think of when we think about doing that. So Haley, so glad you're here with me, my friend. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. It's great to see you. Great to be here.
Absolutely. It's been a long time since you and I had a conversation. And so I was looking forward to this so much. Before we get to some of the fun stuff in the discussion, Would you take just a minute and tell the audience a little bit more about who you are and what you do, please?
Yeah, of course. I'm Haley Thornhill, as you just said. I'm based in Raleigh, North Carolina. So working remotely for a great company called BrightHire, lead recruiting here. Happy to tell you a little bit more about what we're doing here, if that would be helpful.
Yes, absolutely. Please do.
So BrightHire is the leading interview intelligence platform for talent-first companies. So we help teams improve their quality of hire. How do we do this? We record and transcribe interviews and create a set of highlights. You can revisit and share to streamline the process, improve the candidate experience, and give teams better information to make the best possible unbiased hiring decisions. So happy to be here today on this
Awesome.
topic.
Well, you've had this incredible recruiting career too, which I was so excited to kind of draw from in the conversation today. So you and I both have that history of working as recruiting practitioners, as recruiting leaders, running teams. And I'd love to hear from you. Like, there's all these different pieces we touch in the entire cycle of supporting and managing a candidate. And where do you think in the hiring process the most critical decisions are made when it comes to who to hire? My guess is interviews, but I want to give you the chance to either say absolutely yes or no, it's something else that's more important. But what do you think? Where's that big decision get made?
Yeah, I had a feeling we'd agree on that. So definitely, I think the interviews are a huge and obviously impactful chunk because of what the goal of that whole process is. I will add to that, but I'll say certainly during the interview process, which, as we're all aware, I think can vary quite a bit, sometimes scarily from org to org. I'd say the trickiest part is without true visibility into each stage, it can be difficult, very difficult to understand exactly when things are going really right or really wrong. So, for example, there might be a coaching opportunity related to asking a better question or the right time to ask a follow-up question. But the only way you're really going to know that is with true visibility. So I think that is key. If you're doing all those things right in the beginning and you've got that right process in place, then this should feel more organically possible. But I would say the debrief process is another big chunk of making sure that we're doing things right and we are not allowing the opportunity for bias to creep in. I think we've all probably been a part of the debrief that headed off the rails, maybe totally off the rails, which can be really scary if you're there for that. And I'm laughing, but it's not funny because it really is bad. And how do we make sure that doesn't happen? Like, how do we take all the information we learned during the process, hopefully the very structured process that we've created, and accurately portray that in the debrief? So in other words, how do we keep bias out of the equation?
Yes.
And again, if the right foundation's been set and there's a structure in place, it's much easier to naturally have a structured debrief. But I've got some tips and some thoughts around how to do that.
But again, we both laughed together at that. This is so serious. But the first example I thought of is years ago, we were recruiting for a chief security officer for our company. And we had a candidate come in who was highly recommended, who was incredibly intelligent, just wonderful woman. And when it came time for the debrief, we had already done the technical, right? She had checked out all the boxes of technical. So we had her team that would be working closely with her on the second round to get to ask her questions. And she got to ask them questions about what it's like working with the team dynamic, things like that. And one of the women's comments on her form, written down in black and white there, was, "Did you see her purse?" And right, the purse she brought in was some color or some like brand or something else. It was just kind of weird, but that was her comment. And I said, "Okay, what do you mean by that?" She said, "Well, like, I don't know if I want to work with someone that's got a purse like that." I said, "Listen, okay, you're in the middle of this because we value your opinion. We want you to have your say, but that has zero relevance to the actual job. This has, right? I don't have any idea what any of you in the room right now, right? Nobody, I have no idea what purse you have. Right? I care about your abilities. I care about the value you bring, your ideas. That's what matters to me." And again, it seems like a little bit of a silly example, but it reminds me of how if we, as you said, if we're not preparing people, if we're not giving them a little structure, a little process to think through this, then they may key in on the wrong thing and end up not getting out of that. And we can't go back like, "Hey, sorry, we need a do-over candidate." Especially right now, as tough as it is to find people, you don't get a second shot at that, right?
No, you don't. And it really can create a lot of problems. And as I'm sure you know, and many people know, it can spread, like somebody says something and then somebody else is like, "Oh, well, I mean, it's
Yes.
So it really can cause a lot of problems.
Yes. So you've talked about a couple of things. You mentioned that like the debrief piece, like even that happening. I've seen some companies that say, "You know what? We're all going to share our notes at the same time to an independent, like to our recruiting person. And then we're going to come together as a group and we'll review those together. But it's not like, okay, I'll share mine with you, Haley, if you'll share yours with me. And then we can compare notes and make sure we're on the same page. And then we'll submit them, because that creates groupthink. And I'm influencing you for better or for worse. And it's better to get your perspective on that and my independent perspective on that. And then let's come together and hash that out. Like, oh, you know what? I didn't pick up on that. That's a really great find, or whatever else, right? But there's some things that we can do even around how that process for debrief is structured, it feels like, to make sure this is a little more fair and equitable. What other thoughts do you have on that?
Totally. Happy to add to that. I mean, I think I'm a big proponent of, if you do have scorecards in place, which I believe is a big help, to make sure that no one has visibility to see anyone else's before they're able to complete theirs. That's one thing that you can do to help control. Scheduling the debrief as promptly as possible. Ideally, I would say within 24 hours of the interview is ideal. And when you have a big panel, like a lot of times you have to do that at the time that like maybe it's the final interview is scheduled, so that it's already on the calendar, because a lot of times that can cause problems if it has to be like 4 or 5 days later. So I like to see the recruiter running the debrief. I'm sure there's opinions on that. You know, is it possible that, you know, you can still have someone else do it? Yeah. But I think the best ones I've seen and the most efficient ones I've seen are the recruiter in charge and keeping everybody on track as sort of as sort of the right person to be doing that. Keeping the discussion focused on the scorecard feedback and using it as a guide for the conversation, so that that woman's purse comment doesn't creep in and take over.
Yeah.
That should not have been a scorecard attribute, I'm guessing. Like, what kind of purse does the person have? And, you know, I mean, this is not everybody's fault, because not everybody has an interview training process or program in place, but common biases should be covered as part of that interview training. So, you know, things like me bias or confirmation biases, I mean, these things should be covered. The team should be aware of when these arise, for example, in the debrief, and be empowered to push back. If you hear something that's not right, like, let's be comfortable pushing back on that and talking about why that's not what we're here to talk about. So those are my tips.
So I wrote down kind of concurrent submissions, right? Yeah. If we're doing this concurrently, so it's not that waterfall where I get to look at them all and then decide what I'm going to do. So kind of blind submissions. You said fast debrief. What's your take on that? Why should we do it so quickly?
I just think even if you are the person who like finishes and immediately completes their scorecard, which frankly, let's be honest, not everybody does that. So the more time in between those things, that has an effect on people's memory, unless you have something great like Right Hire. So I think just getting in the habit of doing that, and then not letting the ability for chatter, because we all know, like, you know, maybe you are completing your separate scorecard, but we all probably have Slack, or we're going to see somebody and be like, hey, what do you think? So I think just making it more difficult for that to happen. So the faster you do it, the less time there is for that kind of chatter.
Okay. The forgetfulness piece was part of mine, because I'm, especially if you have one of those days where you have 4 or 5 interviews, you're like, oh yeah, I really like that second one. No, wait, that was the 4th one. Which one was that again? You know, they all start to blend together, even if you are taking good notes. So I thought that was the part, but I do agree, like, that cuts down on the back chatter. It cuts down on the, let's get our story straight before we decide. No, the time to share those things openly is when we do the debrief. That's when we're going to come together. It's so funny, because just today I was riding in the car with one of my 12-year-olds, and she said, hey, we had to share our stuff on one of our projects at school. Other people got to grade ours, and we got to grade some of theirs, like peer reviews. And I got all 5s from some people, but this one person gave me a 4 on mine. And I didn't agree with it. I didn't like it. And we had a conversation, again, teach my 12-year-old about inter-rater reliability, how 2 or 3 different raters can rate the thing differently depending on, I'm very strict, or you're very lenient, Haley, or whatever else. And so those kinds of things are other types of biases. You mentioned a couple of, like, confirmation or similar to me bias, those things like likability. Oh, they just made me feel good. That's nice, but that doesn't mean that they're going to be a great fit for the job. We've got to make sure that we're looking at the job related characteristics. So I'm already training the kids to look for those kind of things in the world. I can't help it. It's how I'm wired.
I love it. They'll be much better interviewers one day, for sure.
Yes. Okay. So we're talking about some good things here in this. And I think the people listening right now are taking some good notes, but they're also going to be, I think they're going to be likely to lean in and say, you know what, Haley, you're right. I like these ideas. I agree with this. They may believe in this as recruiting or HR or even DEI professionals, but what about the hiring managers? Because we have to get them in the mix. We have to make sure they're on board with this. anything we can do to help influence them or get them to bite onto this?
Yeah, I mean, I think the training piece is big. And I think that, I don't know what you've seen. I'm sure you could share. I mean, frankly, I've been in a lot of places. I've been in organizations of all sizes. And what I've typically seen is something that is non-existent when it comes to interview training, like nowhere to be found. Maybe it's a slide deck. Maybe it's one call.
I'll sit with you on one interview, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah,
that's the
awkward
extent of it. Like, oh,
shadowing.
do this next time.
Exactly. Awkward shadowing, which frankly nobody likes. I almost think it's even weirder virtually when there's just like a person sitting there, name, but they're not speaking. I mean, it's just not the best way to do it. So Bright Hire can help there as well, because we're able to train people in real time and in kind of this on-demand fashion by using the recordings. Like your team's already showing up, doing the hard work, which is having these conversations, being able to use that real-time relevant data as it relates to your teams, what they're looking for, how they're speaking to it, is a game changer. So I would say that training is just as relevant for hiring managers, and maybe they've had it, maybe it's been 10 years, maybe it's been 20 years. It's just as important for everybody on the team to be on the same page. So it's not just for new people. It's not just for someone, who just joined the team and there's something you need to show them. I mean, it's for them too, but it's really for everybody. And it's something that should be created in a fashion that it is easy to repeat, scale, and keep real, because, telling people what not to say from a legal perspective so you don't get sued is important, but there's so much more to that. So I think, to go back to your original question, like making sure that hiring managers understand the value. Like this is why we believe in structure. This is why we want to do these things. And when they can see it and hear it for themselves from a visibility perspective, I really think they will understand in a different way how impactful it can be. So you do see and hear where the gaps are and how to improve and how to help your team improve. So I think the companies who get it right pay attention. They do have that visibility. They are looking to regularly improve and strengthen their teams and the overall process, because the worst thing is having people who, it can be another job. And for most of the time, it feels like one, especially if you're hiring a lot of people. So let's make it as easy as we can for our teams to feel confident, empowered, with the right tools, with the right knowledge. And then it doesn't feel like such a job. It feels like, okay, I feel prepared. I'm good. I'm able to be consistent. I know what to say. I don't think that's always the case. I don't think it's always teed up that way.
No. And you and I both know, and everyone listening in right now, all of you know that hiring managers don't say, you know what, I am totally phoning this in. I'm just going to do the bare minimum and I'm just going to pick somebody that I like and we're going to be good, right? That's all I want to do. They want to select the right person, but as you said, they don't always have the right tools. They don't have the right training. They don't have the right support to know how to do that. And in the absence of those kind of things that you're talking about, Haley, we fall back into the very comfortable rhythm of, oh, this person went to the same school as me. That's a point of connection. Let's just have a conversation about that. I'm going to feel more like I like this person. I'm more comfortable with them and they're going to be more likely to be selected. And we might not even get around to as much of the technical piece or the ability to do the job as much because I'm focused on this thing that's completely irrelevant to the actual job. And so the training piece helps in a lot of ways. And I so agree with that. I tell the story a lot about my first time I ever sat through a supervisor training. We spent 5 days watching videotapes, right? Pop one in until it plays, take the next one out, put the next video in. And it was all about, here, don't do this, don't do that. It's at the minimum floor, like you're talking about. We can train them on, don't ask questions about these things. But if we never tell them what to ask questions about or what great interviewing looks like, or our best interviewer, the person who selects people who actually stay longer or who perform better, here's the way they interview, right, compared to others. Those kind of things are golden. Those things are so valuable. And I've done that in the past where I say, hey, if you want to know how to interview well, right, you do need to come and sit in and watch Antoine interview, because the way he talks to people, he gets them to open up and really he goes deeper, and he can tell when they answer a question halfway. And he's like, they're leaving something on the table here. And he'll ask that follow-up to try to draw that out of them. Right? Yep. Those kind of things we see as recruiters, we assume managers see them the same way. And I don't think they do. I don't think they really have the same awareness, because as you said, they've got a full-time job and it's not interviewing, it's something else. And this is just one thing that's keeping them from that job. So they just want to get it done as fast as possible. If we can help enable them to do it better, they get to do it less often because the people won't turn over as often, and they'll stick around longer, and all the other good things that are involved in that. So I love the piece, really focusing on the training element for managers. because we always talk about communication and things like that, but the training piece seems like it forms this fundamental layer that we can fall back to. It gives us a common language, all the other benefits of that.
That's right. I mean, for everybody listening today too, I think structure doesn't have to mean like, rigidity and robotic and take the human out of it. Like
Tell me about your job experience. No, it doesn't have to feel like it's
no.
no.
You don't have to. Don't take the human out of it. Like, you can still get to know people, but make sure that the rest of the stuff is being, what is it, portrayed, or like,
yes,
in a structured way, so that you get what you need from those conversations. But don't forget to you can still connect. Like, that's okay.
Yes.
Still human.
Yes. One of the things I think I said to you before we started recording today, but one of the things that stands out to me is this: we're talking about these sorts of things to improve the hiring process as a way to create more equitable hiring outcomes, right? To make sure everyone gets their fair shot and we're not being biased or slanted in how we're picking someone. But the other piece of this too is when we're doing this, for me, it feels like the hiring processes are more repeatable, right? They're more consistent, they're more predictable, we'll say, because we're doing these things and we know that when we do these things in this order, we get this result. Just like you see your hiring funnel and you know it's going to take X candidates in the top of the funnel to get to one that we're ultimately going to hire. We know what that ratio looks like in general. The same thing applies here. We know when we take people through this path, we're going to find someone who is highly qualified, who's a great fit for what that role needs, regardless of their background, their skin color, their whatever else that those things that are extraneous that don't matter in this conversation. We're going to get right to the heart of what really does matter because we're doing it in this process and following the steps like you're talking about here.
That's right. And people want to feel like they've had the opportunity to share about their experience. And sometimes when those biases creep in and you start going down some path where you're focused on something that doesn't matter, those people feel that, it's all very much a part of candidate experience. It's not a one-way street. I mean, they will come away from that feeling like they did not have a fair opportunity to talk about their experience and what they've done and how it relates to the role. So it's makes a big difference.
All right, I'm going to give Bright Hire a quick shout out, just because this is one of the things that I tell others when I mention the company. This is one of the things that stood out to me the first time I ever met the team, is that one of the things you can do when you're getting these insights into interviews in a deeper level than you ever had before, frankly. One of the things that stood out to me from this DEI lens we're talking about today is you can even look into those interviews and say, hey, look, did you realize that when you're interviewing a male candidate, that you're talking about 30% of the time and they're getting 70% of the time to talk about their skills, their strengths, their abilities? But when you're interviewing a female candidate, you're talking about 60% of the time. So they only have 40% to sell themselves and prove their worth in this interview, right? In that sort of situation, how are they ever going to look better than the male candidates when they're getting 30% less time to promote themselves or talk about what their strengths are or to elevate their story and what they're about? So that kind of thing, even something as simple as that, right now, most of us have no clue what those numbers look like, what those ratios look like for our hiring teams. And that kind of insight, even at that level, allows you to say, hey, wait a minute, that shows us that something we're doing isn't working. We've got to change that. And it creates that coachable, teachable moment.
Yes. I mean, there was a leader that I worked with in the past. He will remain unnamed, but regular feedback when interviewing female candidates from him was, she talked too much. If I could have driven back in time with Bright Hire and said, you know what, actually you spoke for 64% of the time. So she didn't talk too much. Something we know is there's feedback there, but where is it? Like, let's get to the real feedback, if there is real feedback. Okay. And you just don't have the opportunity to do that with evidence, without the visibility, without something like Bright Hire to show you and take it back and say, let me show you, let's figure this out. Like, because I'm seeing a trend here. This is the fourth person we've gotten that feedback on. So that is another level of confidence that doesn't really matter how long you've been doing it. I'm not shy, but it's still helpful to have it, to be able to take it back and say, here, look at this.
Yes, this is not just my take on the world, right? Wet finger in the air, but the actual data show this. And so we probably should pay attention to it and figure out what we're going to do together. Right. One thing I'm always careful to do in that sort of situation is this isn't like an indictment, like you're terrible at this. This is a process improvement exercise. How can we get better at this? How can we make sure that the next time around it goes even smoother? It goes even better. We get better outcomes. So sometimes I know that can be tough because it can feel like we're bumping heads for the hiring leaders. And yet it's like, no, we still want the same outcome. We both want the same thing. We want to pick the right person. We want to do it fairly. We want to make sure that this person sticks around with us for a long time. We want to commit to them. We want them to commit to us. So awesome. All right. So this has been such an incredible conversation. If someone wants to learn more about Bright Hire, what you and the team are doing, I'll make sure and tag you here in the comments so people can reach out to you, Haley, and connect with you here on LinkedIn. Is there another way that they can reach out and learn more about Bright Hire?
Yeah, of course. If they go to brighthire.com, there's also our Shine community, which is a Slack community for TA professionals. And I can share the link with you to share, hopefully.
Perfect.
Or help with that. And then lastly, our resources tab on the Bright Hire website has got some really great structured interview training, tips, facilitation guides, awesome questions, competency-based, something I've never seen before. So it's a really cool resource to check out.
Okay, excellent. So good resources, good tools, all those things for everybody listening in today. I hope you've got some good notes from this. I know I have to take a note over here, get some good ideas from Haley. Thank you again, my friend, for joining us. I really appreciate you and the Bright Hire team for supporting the event.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Ben. It was great.
Absolutely. Stay tuned for more. All right. Goodness, great conversation. Some good comments and some notes. I've already, again, seen everybody kind of sharing about how they use scorecards, how they're using that to create more clear and consistent processes for people as they're going through the interviews. And I don't know about you, but George really liked my robotic interview impersonation. So I can't do the robot, but I know you probably could if we asked you to.
No, I could not.
No, you okay.
Don't put that in the chat. I think the last time you did that a few years ago, I ended up somehow dancing.
He ended up doing some dancing. It was pretty darn incredible. If you didn't see it, that's worth digging up in the archives for sure. Oh, goodness. Okay. So we talked about interviewing, we talked about hiring, we talked about some of those kinds of things in the conversation there with Haley. Before we start our final session of the day, so we're already there with you. Before we start our final session of the day, I wanted to give a quick shout out to Leah. So you had made a comment about you were tired of DEI and B conversations requiring a business case because employers should be focusing on those things. If it's really about equity, if it's really about being inclusive, we should focus on that first. And I completely get where your sentiment's coming from. But the hard part is, if I'm in marketing, if I'm in sales, any other part of the business, that business case is required for the company to invest in it, right? So that's the trade-off. That's the part of that makes that hard. I'll tell you, though, that I am talking to more employers who are of larger size, typically, that have environmental, social governance sort of capabilities or functions in the business. They're thinking about other aspects of how they affect the communities where they operate, right? The communities where they serve customers, the communities where they hire people. And they're looking at DEI conversations as part of that social aspect. Because as someone said earlier, and I wish I could credit you for this because it was a great comment. They said, this is not just about employment. This is about impacting the communities where we operate. And to that degree, I think some companies are now starting to make that transition because it's the right thing to do. And let's hope it pays off long-term because it's the right thing to do. But guess what? We're going to do it anyway because we should be. So I'll give you that shout out, Leah. Great comment. We're going to make sure and get you a book as a thank you for sharing that there. George, I need you to stall for me for a minute so I can get your video queued up.
Cue it up. I would just elaborate even more on that. I think when I hear the word ROI, and I think where businesses are today and some of the changes that we are seeing in a lot of companies and organizations, man, is that the ROI is no longer just monetary, right? Sure, at the end of the day, we are in business to make money, to take care of our people and their families and be able to provide, the opportunity from a monetary standpoint. But when I think of ROI, I believe in my heart, and I know in the business that I am in and the people that I'm connected with, ROI is no longer just monetary. ROI is attention. How can we gain the attention internally? As well as with our community, as we get more involved, as we take what we do and we match what we do with why we do it, it's that whole creating a purpose and a sense of belonging and connecting that passion to it. And I think it's important for us to understand that too. As employees, sometimes we see a lot of things happening and we're seeing all these things and we say it's only because of money. And sometimes I think the heart of it really is, sure, it's going to bring in more income and opportunities for that growth. But don't judge the heart because money is part of the thing. Judge the heart by intentions. And I think the intention is that we need to have this. It's been something that's been avoided, and we can no longer just avoid this space. It has to be a part of that from every aspect, from the hiring, from the business, strategy. In that case, that it provides the marketing strategy. All these things tie in together, right? We can't separate them. As a company, as you grow, you got to have them all combined together. And ultimately, you got to know the heart of your leadership.
Excellent. Excellent.
Did I buy you enough time?
You bought me enough time, but also you bought the audience enough time to share some ideas there, because Constance, when your comment there about this is not just about ROI in terms of someone's pad in their pocket, right, on the bottom line, but also this is about the ROI of having employees who are excited about coming to work, who feel like they belong and are connected. And that's a great segue into this last conversation where I get to interview my good friend George about some of the new data we've collected at Lighthouse around employee belonging. We're going to be sharing some of that very soon. But what we're seeing in the data overall, I'll leave you on the edge of your seat because you're going to hear from him on that. All right, here we go. We're going to dive into our last session. After this, we're going to come right back, and we actually have a list of people who've been commenting. I've got a couple slots left to pick some names out to give away some more of these books. I've got a whole stack of them back there. I'm not going to knock that one over again. Got a whole stack of them back there, and looking forward to giving those away to you after the event. So please comment, share, dive into this discussion for the last portion here with George as we learn from him and get inspired by him. Here we go. Hey, everybody. George and I are so glad that you're here with us on this amazing event we've been putting together today for you around the state of diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, what's new, what's next. We've been talking about some of the things, hearing from some other leaders about what they're seeing, hearing about some of the tools that we can use as employers to create more support for our people. And it's been so incredible for me to have a front row seat to this. And I know for those of you who are summer school alumni, you know that George and I do a lot of stuff together, but I haven't had a chance to have him on as a guest to treat him like one of our other speakers, right? He and I usually do some free flow and stuff. So I want to give him a chance to really speak from his heart, to share some things with us in this conversation. And I'm going to treat him like any other speaker as we go through this. So not like the best friend that he is. So George, glad you're here with us.
Thank you so much, Ben. It's a great pleasure, as always, to be with you, my friend, my brother, and also to be with all those out there virtually, some of our HR Summer School alumni, and all our new faces, our new friends that are here today. We had a wonderful group of speakers that we're excited about, and obviously passionate topics that we'll get into today. So appreciate it as always.
Absolutely. Well, you and I actually did an event 2 years ago, if you remember, which seems like 1,000 years ago now, right? But it was one of the first times we actually worked closely together. And we did work with our friend Leslie over at People Strategy, did this anti-racism forum, right? And had these incredible speakers coming through. And so I've had people ever since then saying, hey, would you do something else on that front? Would you bring that conversation back? And so this is my best attempt to do that. And I was so excited to have a chance to do this with you. And again, you get to be my co-host, but also get to be a panelist today. So before we dive into some of the fun stuff we're going to talk about and hear from you about some of the things that are on your heart, would you give the audience a bit more about who you are and what you do? Because I don't know that all of them know the breadth and depth of George Rogers.
Of course, I'm George Rogers, obviously. I am very passionate towards growing leadership and culture within the workplace, and obviously tying that into how it affects the D&I and belonging space as well. So I'm very passionate about that. Obviously on the team with the good friend, Ben Eubanks at Lighthouse Research and Advisory. And, excited about that partnership as the chief culture officer there. And so other things that I do, obviously behind me, these are actually live shoes. I do like to purchase shoes as part of my mental health. I blame it on that. People ask, it just gives me satisfaction, it relaxes my mind, it gives me a little peace. And every shoe has a story. So I get to wear shoes and allow people to walk in my shoes in a sense with the stories that each one shares with me.
Excellent. Yeah, you're an incredible speaker. And I was talking to someone yesterday, actually, I was telling you, I was actually in Dallas yesterday talking to someone, and they said they heard George telling his shoe stories, right? If you do a speech called In My Shoes. And so you didn't mention it, but you're a speaker. And at some point in the future, you're going to be an author. I know you're working on that manuscript. And so there's some great stuff to come from you. And I can't wait to see all of those things. I'm so excited for that. So what I was hoping to do today is I want to quiz you a bit on the intersection of DEI, culture, and leadership, because usually when I hear someone talking about DEI, sometimes they'll bring in culture as a part of this. Sometimes they'll talk about the importance of leadership in the bigger conversation, but you do it in a way that kind of connects all those dots together for me in a way that's really powerful. So it's kind of an open question for you. So I guess to start off with, where do you see this conversation about DEI, what's happening in that space, and how employers are supporting their people? How does that connect to the culture piece of that?
Yeah, I think the root of it, Ben, in all honesty, it starts when you talk about D&I, you talk about culture. The root of it really, to me, starts within leadership. And so as we talk about those things, we can talk about D&I and B and belonging in that space. We can talk about culture, but really those two, assets and powerful impacts that can happen internally and externally is really dictated on the leadership. Right. And so when I think of leadership, I think leadership, and I believe leadership is an example of love, trust, and grace. Right. And so that's my definition. We have great leaders, the John Maxwell, that says leadership is influence. And I believe that. And I believe we influence people by showing them love, grace, and that trust. And then as you think about leadership, and I as I speak on leadership, I believe leadership really starts with then self-leadership, right? Because a lot of times we've heard words such as programs in the D&I space. And I truly believe we don't need another program or a system in place in our workplaces. We need people who live a lifestyle that is simply who they are. And so when I think about those three, tiers, D&I and B, culture and leadership, I believe the foundation is really within leadership, because that's, the foundation of your stakeholders. The leaders dictate really how high, how wide things can go, the flow of those things. And so when it comes to that, I believe leadership is the heartbeat of it. And then it becomes, how well are we leading ourselves, and that self-leadership and the influence that we do within ourselves so that we can then influence, impact those around us.
I love you talking about grace and trust, right? It's pieces of this, because when we think about leaders, sometimes we think about commanding, charismatic, right? You didn't use any of those words to talk about what leadership looks like, what great leadership looks like. And I love that, because sometimes we get this false sense of things, or we see something, right, with the stereotype on TV of the leader that's commanding, and everyone's like, wow, I'm just, in all of them. And so I'll follow them to the ends of the earth, whatever else. And the real truth is, for most of us, and I would imagine for you as well, when you think about those leaders that you've had in the past that really had an impact on you, the ones that really influenced you deeply, it came from that place of giving you some grace when you need it, giving you that kick in the rear when you needed it, but also giving you some trust to say, I hired you, I believe in you, I want you to do your best. And I love that you bring those pieces into that leadership component of it, because sometimes I feel like we get the lenses on that we don't see that piece. And I think that's so important.
Yeah, it is. I think, I believe that, life is the sum of how well we lead ourselves when we talk about those leadership things. And so it's really how are we leading ourselves, and really, we got to love ourselves. I know in the HR space, we've been preaching, and I've been preaching for a long time. Let's put humanity back into HR, into the human. Let's really be human. And when I think about humanity, I think about those three characteristics, right? Those are the fundamental things that we need in our lives. We need love. We need that connection. And sure, there's, many types of love, and, there's a guardrails within the HR space, and how well, we educate the importance of what love, filial, brotherly love, and really, being there for our people. I think it had become very crazy to me, in a sense, that we love what we do, right? We're passionate about the thing that we get to do. We love where we do it, our work, or whoever the company is that you're working with. And we love who we do it with, but we don't share that connection of, and I love you. And I want you to know that, those words are so powerful, because you never know on the other side of the table, that employee, that team member, if they've ever connected, if they've ever felt like somebody cared enough about them, right? So as we talk about these words, grace, and showing grace in a time that somebody may not deserve it, but they really need it in their life. And I want to show them grace and give them the opportunity to say, hey, here's a mistake, here's a failure, here's an opportunity, whatever it may be. I'm gonna give you grace, because I believe that you can get better. I believe that you can grow. I believe that you can elevate yourself and learn from whatever it may be. And then I trust you to do those simple things, and I'll show you and lead you the way. I think those characteristics are so huge, man, because everybody needs that hope that somebody is there for them. And then you tie that into how we lead people. what that does for your culture, right? What that does for the workplace when they know that Ben cares for you, and George may care for you, or whoever's on the other side of this audience here, to be able to say, hey, my name, your name right now, you care for somebody, and that team member knows that, hey, I can count on that person. It impacts your culture so huge, because culture is what people believe and feel and how they behave most of the time. And so what do they believe when it comes to their leadership, right? How does that impact them from a mental standpoint? We've been talking about mental health and how that ties into belonging. When you have somebody that is connected with somebody and they feel like somebody appreciates them, and tying into that, we at Lighthouse Research, we got some data coming out on the psychological definition of belonging is I feel respected, I feel accepted, and I feel appreciated. When we have leaders who do those things, Ben, it allows them to be naturally who they are as an employee, as a team member. And in doing so, it raises the bar in a sense of belonging in that workplace. And some of the stats that I really love when it comes to great leadership, Ben, and an employee that says, you know what, I feel like I am appreciated and respected, and I'm trusted by my leader, 4 times less likely to have faced mental health decline this year, when they feel like they're connected to somebody, when they feel like their leader loves, trusts, and shows them grace, they feel appreciated. Those things tie in so much, and it gives them that sense of belonging, and I want to be here.
That gets me, because there's a company I ran across recently. It's based in Canada, and they actually have a head of diversity, equity, inclusion, and well-being, workforce well-being, and they share that title. She has both titles because she said these aren't distinct and separate. And as you just shared there, that stat, right? How you feel, how you're connected or not, or disconnected from your company, affects your mental well-being. It affects your physical health. It creates more stress for you if you feel like you're going to this place that you're alienated, or you're not around people that love you and appreciate, support you. Right? That is so powerful. And I'm glad you brought the research up, because that's one of the things I wanted to give you a chance to tap on just a little bit, because for all of you that are listening out there, you've heard, again, some stories and things today. One of the things we do at Lighthouse is really focus on the research and trying to understand what's happening and trying to understand what the workforce needs from us as talent leaders, as HR leaders, as business leaders. What do they need from us to help do that? And George, you said a minute ago, right? It's not just a program, right? We can't just check the box, say, okay, we're good there, let's move on. Because we see time and time again in our research, even in the mental health side, where someone says, okay, we put this thing in place, but then the workforce didn't see any benefit, or they didn't feel like the things improved for them. Yeah. And it can't just be that. It has to be embedded in the culture, in the decisions, in the behaviors, as you were saying a minute ago. So this belonging thing is so powerful. What other things kind of came out of that? I know I've already seen behind the curtain, but for the audience's benefit, what are some of the other positive outcomes when you have a workforce that feels like they really belong or really connected? What are some of the other outcomes that we see in the data?
A couple of other things that we saw, Ben, is that as I mentioned, 4 times less likely to have faced mental health decline. That same person and those employees that have that high sense of belonging, where they're connected and they're there, 9 times more likely to say that their direct leader, manager, if you want to use that word, supports them. Right. Mm-hmm. So when you feel like you belong into the workplace, based on this research, you feel like you're respected, you feel like you're accepted, and you feel like you're appreciated by your leader, you're 9 times more likely to say, you know what, Ben was a huge part of why I feel the way I feel. Right. And even in that, when you have somebody that is connected, they're 2.5 times less likely to quit their job. They want to be there. They want to be around people. It's no longer about money. Right. For a long period of time, it was like, I want to make the most money. I want to be, belong, and I want to get what I'm worth. Now, let's, take it a step to the side. Money is important. You want to have your value there. But I believe what has happened since post-pandemic, and because of the pandemic, is allow a lot of people, individual employees and team members, to find a sense of who they are. Right. The worth is not just monetary, it's mental. Can I go work with somebody who appreciates me, respects me, and really accepts me for who I am and where I am? And if I find that, I want to stay. Sure, I can get more money, but can I get more money and great leadership like I have where I am right now? And so the importance of really having somebody who really respects you, appreciates you, and accepts you, and you feel a sense of belonging, you want to be there. You want to be there. And that's important as well, Ben. Another one that really, stuck out to me is that, 5 times more likely that team member that feels that sense of belonging, 5 times more likely are they to recommend their employer, right? When we talk about retention, we talk about the data, and we talk about best places to work and why do people want to come to your company versus another competitor, and maybe the salary is a little bit low. Great leadership will impact you so much that you have internal marketing, right? When we talk about how do we get the word out, your best marketing for hiring is the person that's working on the inside. If they're talking about the company and how great it is, how wonderful their leaders is, it's going to make want to have other friends and family members say, man, I want to be a part of that, because you're coming home, you're not stressed, you're mentally right, and you're always talking about the leader who's making you better, that's respecting you, that's accepting you, that's appreciating you. And that's important as well, Ben.
Man, one of the things I love to do when I'm speaking is I talk about a leader that I worked. He didn't directly manage me, but I got to just be in his sphere of influence, we'll say, right? All these years ago. And I saw how he treated people, and I saw how amazing it was, the transformation, even for people that were not making very much money in some cases. They're doing really hard and strenuous work, and yet he helped to bring the very best out of them. And so I love that you have wrapped into this leadership piece into it in this bigger conversation around belonging, because you already had intuitively arrived at that as we started out earlier, right? On the culture, the leadership piece, bringing those things into it. But it excites me so much to see now that the data are really coming out to support that, to show, hey, guess what? It's really hard to feel like you belong if you've got a manager that doesn't respect you, that doesn't think that you should be there, that doesn't want to hear you speak up. It seems so simple. It seems like table stakes. And for some of you out there, you're like, yeah, I knew this already. Guess what? Now there's some data to back it up. And so I'm going to make sure and drop in the comments here a piece that we're having George work on that's going to share some of those findings, share some of those other stats and things with you, so you can bring that back to work with you. For any of you that are trying to make the case for this, they're trying to talk about, I know belonging feels like we should all just hold hands and sing Kumbaya around the campfire. But there's actual business impacts, as you were just talking about, on recruiting or retention, and so much more. So goodness, I'm so excited to have you out kind of beating the drum for this, sharing the good word around belonging and all these kinds of things. George, I'm so excited that you're doing this. If someone wants to learn more about the work that you're doing, what's the best way for them to figure out more? Sorry, I'll do that again. If someone wants to know more about the work you're doing, the research that you're speaking about, those kind of things these days, what's the best way for them to do that?
Obviously, they can connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm there. As far as the research goes, they can check out our website, lhra.io, and we can put that in the chat and put actual link. I'll do that as well for you as well. But yeah, LinkedIn and then lhra.io, that'll get you all the research and the data to connect with me personally. And let's do good together and lead the life we love.
Oh, goodness. Thank you again, my friend. I appreciate you being here with us, and everybody else out there. I hope you got some great nuggets and ideas from George, as always, some good one-liners, but also a couple of good data points and takeaways. Hey, I'll convert him over to being a data guy. Just give me a little bit of time. Thank you again, George. Appreciate you.
My pleasure, man. I had a great time. Appreciate you.
Okay, goodness. That was Hey, bring it. I'm going to convert you over, right? It's going to work out. So I hope you all enjoyed the session with George, seeing some of the new data. I did post a link just now to the chat, so you can go and read a little bit of his findings on that. And again, more of those will be coming pretty soon. So we're so excited about this, because we just talked about this before the last break, but it's so important to have things like that to help prove to your leadership, prove to the people, because you're in the middle of it. You're in the thick of it, right? Some of the things today you're like, yes, this is validating, right? Some of these things you might have known, some of these things are new, but you live in this space. For someone who's outside of that, you're trying to convert or bring along to the journey, that helps to bridge that gap. That helps to prove that there is worth to this. This is what the actual research is telling us. That's one reason I love research, is because I spent my time as a practitioner, as an HR leader, and now I get a chance to help bring that research together. And now you're doing the same thing, which is so fun.
It is. It's enjoyable. All the positive things that I talked about being in that research and the data that we shared, when it comes to leaders who are not connected, right? And for employees that are saying, I don't feel like I have a sense of belonging in the workplace, the scary portion of that is the retention side of it, right? Or the lack thereof. 2 out of 3 workers who did not have a high belonging score, that felt like they were not appreciated, they were not accepted, they didn't have that sense of belonging and trust from their leader and that respect. 2 out of 3 of them are planning on quitting their job. Right. And so when people are not connected to their leaders, they don't feel that sense of respect, and they don't feel like they're accepted for who they are and where they are and or appreciated. They're planning on leaving the company. And we see that a lot. And so when you say, why are people leaving? My question then becomes, do they feel respected, accepted, and appreciated? And if not, that's probably a sign, right? Here's your sign.
Here's your sign. Hey, that takes me back. Goodness. But we're getting these indications now. We have these opportunities to actually look at some of the things that are out there. And what excites me is we've talked about some of the things in the conversation today about like how to do this. We talked about what's important to do, how do we make some inroads and bridge these gaps. But what I also love is we spend a lot of time looking at the outcomes, because that's the part of it that we're going to be held accountable for as talent leaders, as HR leaders, as business leaders. At the end of the day, we're accountable for those kinds of things. So such a great part of the conversation. So incredible. All right. A couple of quick things before we wrap up. I know we're right on time. So 3 things I want to do really quickly before we're done here. Number 1, thanks again to our supporters for helping to make this event possible. Bright Hire, Brick, and Bob. Thank you to all of you for participating, for bringing your speakers, for sharing with us some of your insights and things. We definitely appreciate that very, very much. We told you guys, we told all of you there would be some winners, and we have some winners. So let's flip through here really quickly. All right. So if you want to take a screenshot of the page in case you forget, but all you have to do is reach out to events@lhra.io. Went through and grabbed all of you that were commenting, everyone that we could. We tried to, I've tagged a lot of actual comments you've made, because these are going to be helpful for me as I'm thinking about what this means to all of you and how to make sure we bring some of these topics back into summer school and some of the other events that we do together. So for all of you that were commenting, were sharing, thank you so much for playing a part in this, for making your voice heard, because we like to hear that. And last but not least, the only other thing on my list to get to was credits. So we actually right now are waiting for HRCI to circle back with us to give us our code. We've done all the submissions and everything else, so that we're waiting on that one. We'll have that number hopefully shortly. We have the SHRM code already. I'll probably go ahead and send that one out so you all have it. But the HRCI code will be coming as soon as I possibly get it from them. The day we get it, it'll be going out to all of you. And again, thank you all for joining us for the session. I'm losing my voice.
You are.
Thank you all for joining us for this session. It's been an honor for me to be able to help and support and serve and bring some amazing speakers, right? Because I'm not the expert here, but we wanted to bring all the speakers who were to help bring their voices and make this valuable. And it's more valuable because all of you chime in as well. George, thank you as always.
Thank you. Thank everybody there that's watching, out all the audience and our friends, our alumni. It's always great. It's an honor and a privilege that y'all give us time and the space to be able to share with y'all. And like Ben said, we're not experts, but we know a few people.
we know some people.
We know some people. We know somebody to know somebody.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, George. Appreciate you, my friend. So glad you're here with us. To all of you, thank you again. We'll see you again next time around. Until then, keep working on your journey. Have a great one.